Hey, hi, hello. Welcome to Diana Emerson. Today we're listening to An Unexpected Killer. Still Secrets of Ancient.
Jonesboro, Arkansas, home of Arkansas State University. Jonesboro is known as the City of Churches, with more than 70 churches in a city of 70,000. With rice farms to the west and cotton to the east, Jonesboro is an economic hub for the region. Jonesboro is a fairly large city. It has the small town qualities of you still have mom and pop stores, things of that nature. It's a nice town to live in, a nice town to raise a family, right dab center in the Bible Belt. It's a town that's it's experiencing serious growing pains.
Crimes in Jonesboro, Arkansas was just unknown. We didn't have anything. You used to could leave your doors unlocked and have your windows up in the evening with your egg fan on. It was just a very hometown environment, yet big enough that you had everything that you need.
In an affluent suburb of Jonesboro, Mark Despain runs a real estate business.
He was an entrepreneur and he had goals and he was a great family man and loved his children and loved to travel.
He was involved in the real estate business twofold. One, doing appraisal work, for financial institutions, lending agencies, and then also owned real estate, rental property.
Mark was the type of worker that you couldn't buy enough of. He had initially had started working with his mom and dad at their appraisal company and felt strongly enough to be able to open up his own business.
His wife, Michelle, helps out while working a day job at the bank.
Michelle and Mark were actually high school sweethearts. Went their separate ways for a while and ended up getting back together.
Mark is 19 and Michelle is 18 when they marry. Michelle has a daughter from a previous relationship and is pregnant with their son when they marry in 1996. We knew that she was very impoverished growing up. She come from a poor family. She met Mark, they got married, and became wealthy, established a real estate business.
Mark and Michelle did buy some properties, and I think, however, they did have help from Jack and Tana, which is Mark's parents. And I think a lot of that is where some of the issues come into play. Maybe their family was giving them some financial help, and it wasn't going toward the bills and things like it should, and that became a questionable thing as where was the money going.
Mark and his father Jack have a falling out, but it's an explosive discovery on Jack Despain's cell phone that sends the family into a spiral. Michelle discovers topless photos of her teenage daughter on Jack's phone. The discovery tears the family apart. There had been accusations from Mark's daughter alleging some inappropriate photographs that Mark's dad had possessed. It caused a rift in the family, with Mark's mother ultimately leaving her husband there for a while.
Jack and Tana did have words and did actually have issues over that. Because Tana, again, being the mom and wanting to be supportive of her son, also had her husband to understand and be there for. So I think it was extremely tough on their entire family.
Initially, Tana Despain, who was Jack's wife, left Jack based upon the allegations. Tana wasn't initially cut off, but then they got back together and Mark cut both dad, mom, sister, family off. And to my knowledge, and based upon everything I've received, they had not talked to Mark in 4 or 5 years.
Michelle's father, Carl, does odd jobs, including rent collection for Mark and Michelle's rental business. when the images are discovered on Jack's phone.
Carl Kelly kind of just did odd jobs for Mark and their family, and even maybe Jack at some point. I don't think Carl was the hold down a job type of person. He would work for the apartment complex, do some maintenance and things like that.
I think that Jack held a grudge against Carl and Michelle and those members of the family that they had, in his belief, turned his son against him and his wife and his family. Whereas Carl had a belief that Jack was a child molester.
I know that there was a lot of bad blood between their families.
August 24th, 2011. Mark meets Michelle on her lunch break from her job at the bank. They go to the local taco shop. For dessert, they get frozen yogurt across the street from the taco shop. It's the last time Michelle would see her husband alive. Michelle returns to the bank from lunch at about 1:30 that afternoon. When Mark returns home, he doesn't realize that he is not alone. At about 3 o'clock that afternoon, Michelle receives a phone call from her father, Carl, saying that the gas bills haven't been paid at several homes, and the gas has been turned off. She needs to go home, grab the bills, and pay them. When Michelle returns home, she walks in on a scene straight from a wife's worst nightmare.
She walked in through the garage door into her residence, and the first room you come to is the kitchen, and Mark was laying on the floor in the kitchen in a pool of blood.
Horrified, Michelle hits the panic button on her home alarm and runs outside to call 911.
911, what's your emergency? What happened to your husband, ma'am? Ma'am, I need you to take a deep breath, okay, and tell me what's going on. No, I just came from work.
Police rush to the scene. Could someone still be lurking in the Despain home?
They come in through the garage and find Mark Despain laying on the floor in a pool of blood. There's no pulse. He's deceased. They try to clear the house because they don't know if someone could still be inside the house.
A lot of blood, meaning that he bled out. This guy bled out. After he was shot, he pumped all his blood out of him.
Mark had one gunshot wound to the left underarm area. He also had a gunshot wound to the face. The gunshot wound to the face would have been the kill shot, so to speak.
Very graphic. Horrific crime scene.
And when they determine that there is no one inside the house, they look in certain rooms. In the living room, it appears that it has been, searched. There's things that are out of order, things that are thrown around. In the master bedroom, there are drawers open. It would at least appear to be a crime scene that could have been a botched burglary, could have been a botched robbery.
Who killed Mark Despain? Was it a botched burglary? His wife Michelle tells police she suspects someone. Closer to home. Jonesboro, Arkansas. High school sweethearts Mark and Michelle Despain run a real estate business together. August 24th, 2011. Michelle Despain is horrified to discover her husband Mark on the kitchen floor. She calls 911. Michelle in to take a statement. She retells the gruesome scene she's just witnessed.
I looked over, there was stuff on the floor, and I looked over, and he was laying on the floor. And I couldn't see his face because he was kind of looking this way, but there was blood all around his back, running all the way back behind him. I screamed his name, and I went over there, and I kind of nudged his leg, and I was screaming his name, I can't. And I got scared because that was on the floor. I thought somebody might still be in the house.
Detectives find 2 shell casings near Mark's body that correspond to the 2 bullet wounds. The imprint of the shell casing clearly indicates that a .380 caliber automatic round was used.
The gun that was used was a semi-automatic, very common, very readily available. I believe it was a .380 caliber, smaller, compact type of gun.
.380 caliber pistols are commonly used as concealed carry weapons. They fit under a waistband and can be easily hidden. Detectives are now looking for a .380 pistol as the murder weapon. They search the house to see if the weapon may have come from inside the Despain home. As more law enforcement arrives, they canvass the neighborhood and investigate whether this was a burglary. Police find a window screen removed, but it doesn't look pried open.
When you went into the master bedroom, there were dresser drawers that had been pulled out, magazines that had been taken out and kind of fanned where they would be seen. In the closet, I think there was a armoire that had been knocked over, a large amount of high-dollar electronic equipment, televisions, computers, things of that nature that weren't disturbed.
Detectives find a hunting rifle left behind as well.
We weren't finding any signs of forced entry. Nothing appeared to be left unlocked, things of that nature.
Outside the home, Carl Kelly confronts Jack Despain, and the family feud reaches a boiling point.
Jack Despain somehow receives notification that it's occurred, and he comes out there, and there's a confrontation, at least with those 2 yelling at each other at the scene.
Police bring everyone in for questioning, including Mark's estranged father, Jack Despain.
There were lots of pointing of fingers. Of course, Michelle's family was pointing their fingers toward Jack. Jack obviously was trying to grieve as a father and trying to deal with having to kind of fight for his own life as far as he just lost his son.
It doesn't take long for investigators to believe that Jack is legitimately upset about his son's murder.
Jack Despain was very distraught during his interview.
I mean, you see it on TV, read about it. You know everything about being in your face.
Meanwhile, neighbors of the Despains tell police they see a blue Mercedes in the neighborhood they've never seen before.
The nature of the neighborhood isn't one that you would just be driving through. I mean, if you were going there, you were either going there as a destination or you were lost. Or you were there to do something, illegal. Those things stood out to people, and they noticed this older blue Mercedes vehicle that had driven through the neighborhood slowly.
Witnesses tell police they remember seeing a man in a green striped polo shirt walking through the neighborhood that day.
They live in an area that if there was a vehicle out of place or someone was there that shouldn't belong, that we've got the type of community in Jonesboro that we recognize these things. And I think that they were seen, there were cars there seen, and actually there was reports that there was a man seen there, basically stalking out the place.
Nothing is adding up for investigators. They suspect it's a staged burglary. Yet, they have eyewitness accounts of a strange car and a possible burglar. The motive for their prime suspect, Jack Despain, isn't holding up. On August 28th, family, friends, and police attend Mark Despain's funeral.
It just brings out the realization that your friend is gone. Someone that was so loved and so cherished by so many could just be gone.
Police notice something peculiar. Mark's family has not been invited.
There definitely was a grudge there, and you could tell that even with the death, that grudge wasn't going away.
In fact, Michelle forces Mark's parents to hold a separate funeral service entirely after the visitation.
At the visitation, you could see just the behavior of Michelle and Carl was just again odd behavior.
Is there more to the family feud for police to uncover? Does the bad blood put someone familiar to Mark behind the murder weapon? Jonesboro, Arkansas. Law enforcement tries to nail down who has killed real estate entrepreneur and father of three, Mark Despain. After nude photos are found on Jack Despain's phone of Mark and Michelle's teenage daughter, a feud engulfs the family. Police suspect the house has been made to look as though it was burglarized, but they can't find any sign of forced entry.
During the investigation, we saw there at the crime scene a lot of unpaid bills, late notices, things of that nature laying around.
Investigators explore the possibility of financial motivations leading to Mark's murder. They start with Jack Despain, but don't get very far.
I believe that early on that Jack had an alibi that they checked out, that he was either, on a roof or working on a roof or someplace. And again, during this period of time when they're looking hard at him, inroads are made when they bring in Johnny Hubbard and Terrence Parker.
A tip from a confidential informant leads police to two new suspects in the case.
There was a tip. There was a gentleman by the name of Quelo that had been bragging, talking about he had killed someone for money.
And they're saying, hey, watch the news tonight. You'll see what I was involved in.
We were able to identify Quelo as being Terrence Parker through records that we had on file.
Police search the Barker's residence and find clothing that matches the description of the man eyewitnesses saw in the neighborhood. Forensic tests are conducted on the clothing that detects the presence of hemoglobin, even if the clothing has been washed. It detects hemoglobin on two different items belonging to Terrence Barker. A routine traffic stop lands Terrence in the county jail for unrelated offenses. Police question him in the murder of Mark Despain, but he denies everything.
I was supposed to be talking to the dude, you talking about Johnny Hubbard or whatever, or being in the car, or went up to some other place or whatever that you was talking about to get in the vehicle with the other dude or whatever. That's right, the church parking lot. Oh, half the people I don't even know that you even talking about, I don't even know them. Or I know of Johnny, or like killing anybody, whatever, like you're saying. I did not.
When Johnny Hubbard is brought in for questioning, he tells police that he's the one who hired Terrence Barker to shoot Mark Despain. Barker is interrogated a second time the next day. This time, he's presented with all of the evidence they've got that points to him as the trigger man. And he knows that police are talking to Johnny Hubbard.
Quelo gives up the job, saying that he did it for $7,000 to $10,000. He looked as a point for easy money, so that's why he did it.
You know what I'm saying? It was, like I said, he was around like 7 or 10, I don't understand. But see, I'm kind of figuring, well, if they wanted to do the kill, and they just wait on the insurance money, how much was the insurance money probably worth to pay this probably don't get back in order to even come up with the scheme.
Police connect phone calls made from Carl Kelly's phone to the phones of Terrence Barker and Johnny Hubbard. Both live close to each other. Johnny Hubbard is a tenant of Mark and Michelle Despain.
What appears happens is that Carl Kelly makes contact with Johnny Hubbard, who's a tenant and one of the people that he would be collecting money from, and knows that Johnny Hubbard has a past criminal history, drug dealing, other things of that nature, and it leads to, at some point in time, a discussion. Do you know anybody that could perform a job for me? You know, anybody that would, could go kill somebody?
Carl Kelly threatens Johnny Hubbard with eviction if he doesn't help with this murder plot. With mounting evidence and the testimony of Johnny Hubbard and Terrence Barker, police believe Carl Kelly is the one who offers to pay Terrence Barker to murder Mark Despain and make it look like a botched robbery.
And there's a belief that he uses Mark's own gun to shoot him.
What kind of gun is it?
Police are confident the .380 shell casings found at the scene belong to a weapon Carl Kelly provides to Terrence Barker.
The gun, I guess, was in the cabin thing, whatever. Because he went to the cabin thing and was reaching, messing with the stuff, whatever, and came out with it.
Carl Kelly knows Mark Despain owns the pistol because Carl arranges for him to own it.
Earlier, Mike Kelly, which would be Carl Kelly's brother, has a gun just like Carl. They both bought them at the same time at a local gun shop. Al's Lock and Keys, that he had a firearms dealership and sold them. Supposedly, when Mark was talking to Carl, and he said he really liked that gun, he calls up his brother and says, "Hey, do you want to get rid of your gun? You know, I've got a buyer for it, or hey, Mark would like to get it."
I appreciate you coming up here and everything. I'm sorry to understand. So I know it's, when you find it? No, it's not there. I've got one just like it. Me and Mike bought one at the same time. He sold his to Mark. Right. And that's why Mark couldn't never figure out how to break it down to clean it. Like I told him. He's always out to show him. Yeah. My fingerprints on the gun.
I would describe this as a very cold-blooded homicide.
When detectives interview Carl Kelly, he immediately describes the rift between Father Jack and son Mark.
Jack Despain told Mark, he said, "I will ruin you and your family." He said, "For y'all accusing me of this." He said, "I will see you run." I heard him say that. That was going to be, if I was going to point a finger at anybody, if that's what you're asking, I'd point at Jack Despain.
I don't believe Carl was a nice guy. I believe that Carl believed that he was going to walk away with this deal. Basically, he was looking out for Carl. Carl was going to receive some money out of this, possibly some steady income.
That steady income would come from life insurance policies covering Mark with Michelle Despain as the lone beneficiary.
There were 2 life insurance policies, and she was the beneficiary on both. There were 2 separate policies in the amount of $500,000.
Terrence Barker tells police it was Carl Kelly who offered to pay him between $7,000 and $10,000 to kill Mark.
Besides the fact that when I can't get it out on the job done or whatever, I guess it's real one.
Investigators now need to take a cold, hard look at the person who benefits most from Mark's murder, his wife, Michelle. To detectives, the body language and reactions of Michelle Despain don't seem right.
I don't know about you, but I would not be cheerful and smiling during an interview where I just lost my husband.
The detective conducting the interview questions whether Michelle is forcing herself to cry as she accuses Jack Despain of the murder. All of her behavior is noted as unusual.
She didn't show any emotion. She appeared to be trying to make herself cry, so to speak. But there was the emotions shown by her weren't real.
We've said that many times. As long as we all had each other, it didn't matter about the other stuff. It didn't matter if his dad got mad because we let that property go. Because we tried to sell the property too. Dad won't sell it.
Detectives believe Mark and Michelle's marriage is not a happy one.
Once we learned of the affair that Michelle was having, we learned that there was money coming out, Michelle paying for different bills, buying food, things of that nature for her boyfriend.
There were speculations about the affair, and so I personally have no doubt that he was aware of the affair, and maybe not necessarily going down the side of divorce at the moment, but I think at some point it was in his head to do that.
A deteriorating marriage, financial troubles, and 2 large life insurance policies are plenty of motive for law enforcement to believe Michelle wants Mark dead. But a motive isn't evidence. Detectives need a smoking gun to connect Michelle to the murder-for-hire plot. Two .380 automatic bullets enter Mark Despain's body, one in his side and another between his eyes. The gun may have belonged to Mark himself. Another eyewitness would come forward, who claims that Carl Kelly approaches him on 2 separate occasions to shoot Mark between the eyes, including once just a week before Mark is killed. Despite Terrence Barker's testimony saying otherwise, ballistic testing on Mark's forehead confirms that he is shot point blank right between the eyes. Michelle Despain's father, Carl Kelly, puts the gun into the hands of a hired killer, Terrence Barker. Now, investigators need to find out if Carl Kelly is conspiring with Michelle Despain to kill her own husband. They establish a motive, and they see suspicious behavior, but those things aren't evidence of Michelle's involvement. Michelle tells police she receives a call from Carl at around 3 o'clock, August 24th, to deal with unpaid gas bills. She says several homes have had the gas cut off, and she has to go home to retrieve bills and pay them. There is indeed a stack of unpaid bills in a bundle on the kitchen floor. But there's a note on the bills. Got extensions. Pay on or before September 3rd, 2011.
She said she had to go home to pick up something, but it was also during the same time that school would have been letting out. So that led me to believe that she was needed to hurry up and get home to maybe keep the children from finding him.
Not only did she pry him away for lunch, but in order to give the intruders a couple of more minutes, she also asked him to go get ice cream.
August 31st, 2011. Police tell Michelle Despain they have arrested the suspected triggerman, Terrence Barker, and the man who drove him to the house, Johnny Hubbard. And they inform Michelle that they intend to arrest her father.
My father?
Yes, ma'am. Your father will be arrested for murder. I have all the information, all the evidence I need.
Mark.
No, ma'am. Your father, Carl Kelly, is responsible for setting this up, partly to have your husband killed.
I don't believe that. I had the tenant call me this morning and tell me that. I did not believe it. Thought it was another rumor.
It's not a rumor, Michelle.
There's been rumors already.
I know there's been thousands of rumors out there.
Carl Kelly, not Jack Despain, is charged with capital murder. Police arrest Carl Kelly and retrieve a .380 caliber pistol from his home. They conduct ballistics testing on the gun, but the results come back inconclusive. Police go over the events of the day with Michelle one more time. Meanwhile, they do some more digging into the contents of her phone.
The phone that belonged to Michelle was forensically examined there at the Jonesboro Police Department. It was the text messages that we were seeing as far as the phone records were not in the phone itself, and it appeared that it had been deleted. It was several months down the line that the phone was forwarded to the FBI, and with the help of some newer technology, they were able to recover those text messages.
The day of the murder, it says it has to be today. Sending a message to her dad that says, can't deal with it any longer. It has to be today. So basically, the dad texts back and says, keep me posted, keep me in the loop as far as your time frame goes.
She was communicating with Carl, giving Carl basically play-by-play details of where she was, where Mark was. He was asking her before that, can you get him to lunch? She's giving play-by-play details to him of when they're leaving the restaurant, details of when he's on his way home.
Police believe Michelle receives a text when the job is done, so she can get to the body and discover it before her children get home from school around 3.
It appeared that Michelle wanted out, that she couldn't take it any longer.
Her motive was in this, that she was going to obtain this large amount of money, continue her way of living that she was comfortable with.
They knew what they were going to do. Kill him, and then they were going to get the insurance money so the father and the daughter could expire, and then they get these poor slobs to go do the dirty work for them.
Once the evidence was recovered from Michelle's cell phone, and with all the other investigative findings, we were able to obtain a warrant for her arrest.
9 months after Mark Despain is killed, police arrest Michelle Despain and charge her with capital murder. Police believe they have cracked the case, but the search for justice doesn't end with an arrest. August 24th, 2011, Mark Despain is found murdered by his wife, Michelle. Phone records show Michelle and her father, Carl Kelly, are in constant contact the day of Mark's murder. Finally, Michelle is charged, and police can put together a complete timeline of what happened. With financial problems, a failing marriage, and an affair, law enforcement believes Michelle wants a way out. She enlists the help of her father, Carl Kelly. Carl threatens Johnny Hubbard with eviction unless he procures a hired killer for Carl. Johnny finds Terrence Barker to be the trigger man. On August 24th, Michelle texts Carl saying it has to be today. Carl contacts Hubbard to make the arrangement.
Right before Mark did go home, they had met for lunch, and then we found that Mark and Michelle had went to a local frozen yogurt shop after their lunch.
Meanwhile, Johnny Hubbard drives Terrence Barker to the Despain residence. Waiting for them there is Carl Kelly.
He had met with Carl Kelly. He was supposed to receive a certain amount of money. He was taken to the house by Carl. Carl let him in through the garage. Terrence laid in wait inside the house in a laundry room.
Takes him in the house, shows him that Mark will come in that door, that he usually, as a habit, sets his stuff up on the counter, his wallet, keys, he'll pick up the rent collections or whatever else, maybe their mail, something else.
Did he tell you who he was texting?
Did he tell you?
Yes, sir. Who did he tell you he was texting?
Play by play.
Play by play.
What they were doing.
Mark had one gunshot wound, I believe, to the left, maybe underarm area. He also had a gunshot wound to the face. The gunshot wound to the face would have been the kill shot, so to speak. Based on the gunshot wounds that he was suffering from, this was an intentional act.
Mark Despain had been executed.
The items that were in disarray did appear as though it was staged to look like some sort of burglary.
Terrence Barker flees the scene on foot. He tosses the gun, which is provided to him by Carl Kelly, into the back of a red truck. In order to make sure her 3 children don't discover Mark's body laying in the pool of blood, Michelle rushes home under the pretense of having to collect unpaid gas bills. Both Carl and Michelle point the finger at Mark's father, Jack, but his alibi is strong and his motive weak. In fact, Jack is cleared of any wrongdoing in the cell phone incident with his granddaughter, which tore the family apart 5 years earlier.
They got school involved, got county involved, state, and I went in and I took a polygraph test and I was cleared.
In the end, law enforcement gets the evidence to charge Michelle Despain with capital murder. Johnny Hubbard is charged with hindering apprehension, a charge in Arkansas that is similar to obstruction of justice in other states.
Johnny Hubbard was a facilitator. He was a go-between between Carl Kelly and provided the shooter, Terrence Barker.
Terrence Barker avoids the death penalty and pleads guilty to first-degree murder.
Terrence Barker was the shooter. There's no doubt. And that he waited inside a closet and shot and killed Mark Despain.
Michelle's father, Carl Kelly, who arranges for the murder and gives Terrence Barker the gun that kills Mark, also avoids the death penalty with a guilty plea of first-degree murder. But Michelle, charged with capital murder, which could lead to the death penalty, is offered a plea deal from prosecutors because of a weakness in their case.
The prosecutors had learned of this new case law that had come out, and they knew that if those text messages were to be suppressed and removed from evidence in the proceedings, that would affect the outcome.
Well, they obtained the warrants, but it was our basis that they obtained the warrants improperly because there should have been a new affidavit specifically stating why this phone needs to be searched again. What has led them to need this additional search. They got an initial search warrant. They didn't find these things that they were allegedly looking for. And so each time they went into this phone, they needed a new search warrant. That was our argument. And if that argument was made and we prevailed, then they may not have enough evidence to go forward. She was charged with capital murder. She ended up pleading to 3 counts of hindering apprehension.
Hindering apprehension, the same charge that Johnny Hubbard pleads guilty to. However, Michelle pleads guilty to 3 counts of it. Each charge comes with a 10-year sentence. But with good behavior, Michelle Despain can be free in as little as 5 years.
In the eyes of the law, justice was served, but what about the eyes of the family?
Our blood starts boiling when we talk about the plea agreement, because we basically feel that she got away with murder.
At the end of the day, she was arrested, and we did our job as law enforcement, and the prosecutors, they did their job the best that they could. Although she wasn't found guilty of murder, she didn't plead guilty to murder based on everything that we had at that time and what we were learning. That was a better outcome than her not ever being found guilty of anything.
A mother and daughter's tense relationship boils over. The daughter leaves home, then disappears.
We tracked down family members, close friends.
2 weeks later, the runaway's mother also disappears.
Whoever has my sister, please let her go. That's when they really knew, hey, something's going on here.
Only one woman is found alive.
We had numerous investigators out there with crime scenes sifting through dirt for 3 days.
Detectives are determined to bring the killer to justice, no matter how long it takes. Alton, Illinois is an all-American town on the Mississippi, just upriver from St. Louis. It's around 3 in the afternoon at the Eunice Smith Nursing Home, where 47-year-old Bonnie Woodward, a hard-working nurse and mother of 4, is finishing up her day. A long staff meeting has kept her there later than usual, and she seems eager to leave. However, Bonnie doesn't arrive home that afternoon.
Everyone in Bonnie's family, they were suspicious. This was not like her behavior.
Her boyfriend, Gary, has been waiting for hours, and all of his anxious calls go straight to voicemail. Though usually home by 3, Bonnie sometimes joins her sister to unwind during happy hour. But tonight, as the clock ticks well past the dinner hour and closer to last call, Gary grows increasingly anxious.
And there was family members that went looking for Bonnie when she did not come home from work.
He heads to several local bars, scanning the parking lot, hoping that he might spot her truck. But he doesn't find it, so Gary heads home, hoping that Bonnie simply lost track of time and that she'll be home soon. Gary's frantic when the phone rings around 6 a.m. Given the hour, he hopes that Bonnie has a good explanation for why she didn't return home. But there's an unexpected voice on the other end of the line. It's Bonnie's boss, wondering why she hasn't shown up for work.
She wouldn't have just disappeared. She had children in the home. One had disabilities, and she checked in regularly. She was a woman who had the same job for a couple of decades, only called in sick 2 or 3 times, just not a person that would normally go off the radar. So that's what led the police to suspect that there was foul play.
Gary does the only thing he could think to do. Go to the place where Bonnie was last seen. Much to his shock, Bonnie's truck is still parked in the employee lot, and he spots something off. Bonnie has left her windows down, something she would never do. So, Gary goes to alert the police.
Her boyfriend at the time, Gary Wilmarth, reported her as a missing person to us. And at that point, the patrol officers notified our detective division due to some circumstances in the case that were concerning, and a few detectives started coming out and working down some leads on trying to find her.
Detective Mike O'Neill with the Alton Police Department takes in the information about Bonnie's disappearance. At first, Detective O'Neill wonders if Bonnie just might be taking some time for herself.
More often than not, if a person is missing, it's usually not a suspicious circumstance thing where there's foul play. It's they left to go do something, didn't tell anybody about it, or they just need to get away for a little bit.
When Detective O'Neill reaches out to close friends and family, everyone insists Bonnie would never leave without any notice.
It really struck people that this was not Bonnie Woodward. This was not like her to just disappear. She had a family at home. Things were very routine with her, with being at work and returning home. And this was very out of character.
Shocked by her sudden disappearance, Bonnie's family pleads for her safe return.
Whoever has my sister, please let her go.
You let my sister go, and I'll come and get her. I want my sister.
Investigators take a closer look at the man who reports Bonnie missing, her boyfriend, Gary.
A lot of times, if there is foul play in a situation like this, it's usually somebody that would know that person.
They tracked a lot of people down. She was living with her boyfriend at the time. They interviewed him extensively.
If Bonnie took off, it's only been, I'm thinking, once or twice. She went 2 blocks over to the bar, called me up, and said, I'm going to have me a couple drinks and chill out or whatever. And
on the day this happened, which would have been the 25th, right, roughly?
Right.
Did you go anywhere at all around the time that she would have been home from work?
No, I was there. Her daughter was at the house.
But an alibi is only good if it checks out. So Detective O'Neill must speak with the person Gary claims he was with, Bonnie's daughter, Jennifer.
Where were you at Friday when this all came up?
Me and Gary and my little brother Aaron and my kids were at my mom's house waiting for her.
Did Gary ever leave?
No.
No. Does he drive? Does Gary drive?
No, he don't have a vehicle to drive.
Okay. So
he never left. He was home all day long.
With Gary's alibi verified, Detective O'Neill moves quickly to figure out who was the last person to see Bonnie leaving work.
I drove by her work, and her truck was sitting out there. And I asked them, I was just like, is Bonnie Woodward still working by any chance? Maybe she worked over. And they're like, no, we seen her leave earlier, around, a little bit after the work meeting.
He soon learns that Bonnie's co-worker saw something out of the ordinary. Bonnie getting into a silver sedan.
I saw him and Bonnie out there, and for some, I didn't see anything strange, but it kind of seemed strange because I guess I had never seen the man before. He was a white male. He looked like he wasn't very tall, maybe 5'8", 5'9", or so.
also noticed that this person was associated to a silver or gray Chevrolet Malibu that he had on the parking lot at the time.
It's not much to go on, but it makes Detective O'Neill wonder if Bonnie might have had a new love interest spicing up her life. Or perhaps she was meeting a former flame.
There were a lot of members of her family who talked about an ex-boyfriend that she had, and that's when they really knew, hey, something's going on here.
Then we get the lead that cracks this thing wide open.
"47-year-old nurse Bonnie Woodward is last seen getting into a silver car with an unknown man. The clock is ticking as Detective O'Neill tries to locate the missing woman, who has seemingly vanished without a trace in the small town of Alden, Illinois. But he must also consider that Bonnie may not be missing at all. She might be having an affair.
There were a lot of members of her family who talked about an ex-boyfriend that she had.
A week before she disappears, Bonnie sends a friend request on social media to an old boyfriend. But this isn't just any old boyfriend. It's Bonnie's first love that at the time turned into a long, tumultuous relationship.
They interviewed him as well.
But it turns out to be a short interview.
Did you talk to Bonnie? No, she just wanted to, be my friend on Facebook. I just accepted her. Other than that, I had no communications with her.
Officers learn he last saw Bonnie in 2002, and he doesn't own a silver sedan. The recent friend request is just a curiosity about an old flame. Bonnie's daughter, Jennifer, has an idea who it might be. Her mom's ex-boyfriend.
My mom is not the type of person that's just going to hop in the car with somebody and leave her truck there, unless she's expecting to come right back.
Who does this guy sound like to you?
It's Chester. I mean, I don't like to pinpoint a guy out, but Chester fits every description. And like the silver Impala, his mom and dad had a silver Impala.
According to Jennifer, the two had a rocky relationship that ended when Gary entered her mother's life. And Chester also fits the physical description of the mystery man from the parking lot.
You dated her for how long, sir?
We started dating, and I was with her for probably a year. She kicked me out, and then next thing I know, Gary's living there.
Despite a history of domestic violence and a bad breakup, Chester is genuinely concerned about Bonnie's whereabouts.
You think she's okay? Right now, what's your gut saying?
I'm scared.
Okay.
Because she's never done this before that I've ever known.
But a call to his employer, a local construction company, verifies that he was at work when Bonnie went missing.
If I hope to God nothing wrong, and if I see her or hear anything, I'll let you know.
Investigators fear they're running out of leads when Detective O'Neill discovers that Bonnie isn't the only person who has gone missing from the Woodward household.
The main thing that we were able to gather from those interviews, and especially with family and friends and the current boyfriend, was that she had a 17-year-old stepdaughter, Heather Woodward, who was recently reported missing or as a runaway.
My little sister, is 17 years old. She's got a missing persons report like 2 to 2.5 weeks ago.
And that's when they really knew, hey, something's going on here. We have a woman that's missing, and her stepdaughter had been reported missing days before this as well.
Could these disappearances be connected?
There was nothing definitive that said the two were related, but we certainly felt that was something a path we needed to go on.
According to Bonnie's family, Heather might be staying with a trusted high school teacher.
She kept saying she was going to move in with this teacher.
This is the daughter?
Yeah. And Bonnie said, no, you're not. And this went on and on and on. Bonnie talked to the principal of school. She said that's not going to happen.
We narrowed in on a teacher in a neighboring city called East Alton that Heather was last seen with her.
Detective O'Neill tracks down the teacher, who at first seems a bit guarded. While friends and family describe Bonnie as a loving mother of four, Christine paints a different picture.
I had Heather in Algebra 1 class as a freshman, and she has been very vocal to myself and all the other teachers of the abuse that goes on at home.
She tells the detective that Bonnie and Heather had a volatile relationship, one that went downhill when Heather's father died 8 years ago, leaving Bonnie as sole guardian. While the relationship was generally bad, tensions flared in recent weeks. Heather and Bonnie constantly fight over Heather's wish to attend college. Christine hopes she can provide a safe haven for the teen until emotions cool down.
And it was during that interview with her that she said that Heather left her residence and she didn't know where she went.
Bonnie called us the night of the 16th. She left a message on my phone that she was coming tomorrow to get Heather, and Heather should pack her stuff. So I did tell her she had to go back home. She cried most of the night.
And then whenever you came back on the 17th, she was gone.
Right.
Locating Bonnie's stepdaughter is now Detective O'Neill's #1 priority.
We just knew that our investigation was going in two separate angles. One, we needed to find Heather, and two, we needed to find Bonnie and see what the situation was with either one or if there was any relationship between those two.
But without any clear leads, O'Neill worries that both cases might run out of steam. About a week after Bonnie goes missing, police get an unexpected phone call. Heather Woodward just walked into the town library.
She showed up at the East Alton Library on her 18th birthday on July 3rd, 2010, and basically said, "I'm Heather Woodward. I've been reported as a runaway."
It's been 8 days since Bonnie Woodward went missing after leaving work. Investigators have exhausted all viable leads when Bonnie's runaway stepdaughter, Heather, suddenly returns. Detective O'Neill wonders if the stepdaughter may have been involved in Bonnie's disappearance.
At that point, I went in to interview Heather and talk to her about where she'd been.
Hey Heather, this is Detective Mike O'Neill from All Things Department. We just need to ask a few things here.
The first initial interview with Heather was, I can't think of a better word than weird. Heather was for an 18-year-old, was very immature. She was holding a teddy bear with her. Her tone of voice sounded like a little girl's.
I packed my stuff and I left. I wasn't going home for 2 weeks to be kicked out again.
And then what happened?
And then I went to stay at a friend's house.
Okay, and who was that?
Just a friend. Don't want to get him in trouble.
Detective O'Neill wonders if this teen has something to hide.
Because you understand that Bonnie's missing right now, we don't have a clue where she's at, so anything that would help us, any other leads or information would be great.
They don't know nothing. They don't like Bonnie. I don't want to know where Bonnie's at.
Heather seemed upset about the overall situation, but talking to her, it was just trying to assess where she's been, what she's been doing, why she took off.
Heather claims she has a lot of reasons for running away. Her relationship with Bonnie has gone from toxic to downright poisonous in the weeks before Bonnie's disappearance.
Bonnie can be mean, and sometimes she hits. Bonnie decided to tell me to pack everything and just get out. I was afraid to go home.
But it isn't just typical mother-daughter tension. Heather explains that Bonnie refuses to support her financially after she turns 18, when her father's death benefit checks would come to an end. Heather wants to apply to college, but Bonnie refuses to help. While this tracks with what Detective O'Neill has heard so far, it still doesn't answer the biggest question. Where was Heather when her mother disappeared?
And at that point, All we knew is she left the teacher's house and nobody had seen her.
Heather eventually told police who she had been with during that time.
I stayed with some people from the church.
So it's Nathan Carroll's family?
She provided information saying that she was with the Carroll family. She ultimately had attended church with the Carroll son, and that's how she kind of began to know the family. She identified Roger and Monica Carroll as being the parents.
In order to verify Heather's story, investigators head to the Carroll home to interview the church family who welcomed Heather into their home.
After interviewing them, they acknowledged that Heather was with them. They acknowledged that they knew Heather was a runaway. And it was ultimately just their explanation, and especially Roger's explanation, was based on things that Heather had told them. They were keeping her safe.
Right off the bat, Heather's alibi checks out, but investigators are stuck by a couple of uncanny details. Roger Carroll fits the physical description of the Salt and Pepper Mystery Man. And there's a silver car parked in his driveway.
So those were obviously some key points that we were looking at, but still there was nothing there to 100% say that he was the person, or they did have that involvement in her disappearance.
But in order to make sure, Detective O'Neill asks the Carrolls to come down to the station to talk further.
They brought all three of the Carrolls into the police department and interviewed them all. They said that Heather had been staying with them, that they don't know anything about Bonnie, that Heather reported that Bonnie was somewhat abusive to her, and they don't know Bonnie, had never seen Bonnie, didn't know where she lived or worked. Just basically, we know nothing about Bonnie, but we had Heather with us.
Under questioning, Roger denies having ever met Bonnie Woodward. He is only trying to help his son's friend.
As far as Bonnie, you've never had a conversation with that woman, and you've never been face to face with that woman. You know where she lives, but you've never, other than you've driven by there like 2 times, right? Yes, that's correct.
Satisfied that Roger is being truthful, Detective O'Neill chalks up the similar hair and car to coincidence, but explains to the Carrolls that they are not entirely off the hook.
The 2 adult Carrolls, Roger and Monica, were charged with harboring a runaway and obstructing justice.
The couple are booked and fingerprinted, then sent home. Another lead in the case goes cold. Despite the setbacks, Detective O'Neill refuses to give up. He hopes to provide some form of closure to Bonnie's distraught family, who fear the worst.
And we're still looking for Bonnie. We're still looking for any information related to her disappearance. And nothing. It just went silent with anything coming in.
As the weeks pass, fears grow Bonnie may never be found, dead or alive.
Then in September of 2010, we get the lead that cracks this thing wide open.
It gives me goosebumps to think about it. There was an extensive search, close to 40 or 50 law enforcement officers.
We took numerous firearms from the house and a large amount of ammunition.
2 weeks after running away, Heather Woodward returns, but her stepmother is still missing, and now presumed dead. The church-going family who provide refuge to Heather appear to be good Samaritans, assisting a teen in distress. And just when the investigation seems to be turning ice cold, Detective O'Neill gets a phone call that flips the case on its head.
The Illinois State Police Crime Lab gets in contact with our department, and they notify us that there were fingerprints that we had obtained and sent to the lab for analysis. And of those prints, there were prints that matched up with Roger Carroll.
It's a stunning turn for the investigation, and no one is more surprised than Detective O'Neill.
During Roger's initial interview, he had said that he never had contact with Bonnie. Based on our interpretation from that interview, there'd be no reason for him to have ever touched her vehicle. So at this point, we knew that he had at least provided false information.
It's enough to take Bonnie's case out of the deep freeze. The masked prince and Roger Carroll's connection to Heather are enough to obtain a search warrant for the Carrolls' property. The district attorney's office is also informed that the Carrolls are now under suspicion for Bonnie's presumed murder.
So after the police got the information that Roger Carroll's fingerprints matched Bonnie Woodward's car, there was an extensive search. Dozens, if not close to 40 or 50 law enforcement officers went to the Carroll property.
But this search will not be easy.
There's 60 acres of land there. We're just looking for anything at that point. We searched the vehicles, searched the house, searched the property for anything that may be linking Bonnie to that property or to that family. It was very difficult to search such a wide area for specific evidence.
Unfortunately, they don't find any trace of Bonnie, but do find something else that heightens their suspicions.
During that search, we took numerous firearms from the house. They had close to 30 firearms and a large amount of ammunition, more than I could even count, that was inside this house. But also we had to understand that this is a rural country area. You know, it's not too shocking for a family to collect guns and have a large amount of guns.
You got a lot of guns in the house, right?
A few.
And you target practice, I guess, routinely?
Some. Not as much as I used to, just because animals got it.
What do you usually target practice with? Handguns or long guns? Or?
It depends. A little of each.
And it was at that point Roger was interviewed, and more specifically this time, had he ever had contact with Bonnie? Had he ever touched her truck?
Any chance your fingerprints would be on Bonnie's car? On the driver's door? Like all over it?
No way. No.
No chance?
No.
Okay.
And then when faced with the situation of fingerprints of his were on her truck on the driver's side door, basically in the same area that it was reported that this unknown person was talking to her at the end of her work shift, why were those prints there?
Any chance your DNA would be all over that driver's door?
No.
And how do we explain it if it is?
I've been trained. No, there's no way that my fingerprints are on that card or my DNA is on that card or there's just no way.
Your prints are on that door.
Confronted with this damning fingerprint evidence, Roger doubles down on his story.
His explanation was they weren't his. He had never touched her truck. And the only thing he can come up with is that he was been framed. And no other explanation to show for why those prints were there.
Roger Carroll was charged with a felony obstructing justice, and that was pretty much the end of the conversation at that point.
Investigators have to answer a confounding question. Why would Roger Carroll want to kill Bonnie Woodward? Could Heather have encouraged him? Investigators interview Heather, who is now attending college.
Has there ever been any point where he has ever seen Bonnie that you know of?
No.
Has there been any point where he has ever seen her car, at least?
So in that interview, we made it clear to her about the fingerprints that were found on the truck.
What we're trying to tell you right now is the physical evidence in this case. That's why we're contacting you. Okay, this is what we need to know. There is no reason for his prints to be on Bonnie's truck. No, there's not.
She seemed genuinely shocked that there would be that contact. She didn't know of any circumstance in which Roger would have ever touched her vehicle.
O'Neill is unable to prove conclusively that Heather has no knowledge of what Roger Carroll did on that day in June when Bonnie disappeared.
I don't want them to come back in their interviews right now and say that Heather told us to do it.
No, I didn't tell them because I don't want them to happen to Bonnie.
Under questioning, she denies any involvement and seems very distraught by the possibility that Roger has something to do with Bonnie's disappearance. Without a body, a murder weapon, or a witness, Detective O'Neill's hands are tied.
Ultimately, if something did happen and there was foul play, trying a homicide without a body would be very difficult, and it's difficult to prove. So having only the fingerprint and a few conversations just wasn't enough for us to push it over.
Sharing this disappointing reality with Bonnie's family dredges up hard emotions.
Those conversations I had with the family was very difficult during that time and the years that had gone by without any new leads and nothing else. And at this point, the Carroll family had shut down. They did not want to speak to us any further, and we knew that there was nothing else that we could do at this point other than just wait.
And once again, the Bonnie Woodward case goes cold. Until a special prosecutor takes up the case file, almost by chance.
I was with the Madison County, Illinois State's Attorney's Office for 18 years. I personally became interested in cold cases that were in my office at the time. And I asked my supervisor if I could begin looking into some cold cases. The Bonnie Woodward case just happened to be the first one I pulled out.
After steeping herself in the facts, Jennifer Mudge is certain that Roger Carroll has gotten away with murder.
All we had was his prints on her car, and we did not have her body.
Faced with the same challenges Detective O'Neill confronted 8 years ago, Mudge realizes there's not much she can do. But 2 months later, she receives a phone call that changes everything.
They called me to tell me that Roger Carroll had attempted suicide. He had committed a domestic battery on his wife, Monica, and then he had walked off into the woods, injected himself with insulin, and a Jersey County Sheriff's deputy found him unresponsive, near death. He was taken to a hospital and arrested for the domestic battery.
And at that point, we thought this may be our time to try it again, to see if there's anything new that we can establish, to get going with this case again as far as Bonnie's disappearance. This may be our only opportunity to continue forward.
But it's not Roger he wants to focus on.
It was after that we reached out to Monica and ultimately explained to her our situation in the case. She was willing to speak to us at this time.
Investigators learn that Monica is divorcing Roger for infidelity.
We have been living separate in the home. He actually moved out of the bedroom, went to a separate part of the house. He connected up with a woman at work and had an affair.
And given the current state of her marriage, she's now willing to tell them everything she knows.
If Roger Carroll gets out, I am scared to death that he will come after me again.
"47-year-old Bonnie Woodward has been missing for years, and the case has gone cold. With no body, the only piece of evidence, a set of fingerprints belonging to Roger Carroll, are not enough to convict.
I mean, no, there's no way that my fingerprints are on that car door or my DNA is on that car door. There just is no way. Your prints are on that door.
But now, a new investigator interested in the case has stumbled onto a twist in Roger's life. He's just tried to commit suicide, and his wife Monica has some shocking information about him.
She was able to discuss several situations and circumstances with Roger, ultimately saying that Roger never came right out and told her that he is responsible for Bonnie's disappearance or death at the time.
He told me he didn't have anything to do with it. So I believed him. At that point in my marriage,
she talked about a large fire that was being stoked on the property.
There was a big brush pile that he just burnt for a long time. And I'm talking days.
How far was this from the house?
Pretty close.
Monica's suspicions alone are not enough to move the needle forward. they turn to another family member who may now feel free to talk with Roger behind bars.
We had a meeting, the investigators, myself, and my co-counsel, and we thought the first person we would want to speak to would be the son. Because at the time of Bonnie's murder, the son was 16 years old. So fast forward 8 years later, his mom has just been beaten by his dad, and he might have some things to say about something that he saw back in 2010 that he, as a 16-year-old, would not have wanted to say.
But Nathan is unwilling to speak with detectives. However, he is willing to testify for a grand jury on one condition, that he be granted immunity. Nathan's testimony is nothing short of explosive. He claims that his father became increasingly enraged with Bonnie's alleged mistreatment of Heather and made it his mission to save her, unbeknownst to the runaway teen.
His dad told him that Bonnie, Heather's stepmom, had to go, that she was going to bring bad things their way, and that they had to take care of it. They stopped by Bonnie's house. They stopped by Bonnie's work. His dad specifically commented, "Good, she's at work." They went back to the house. His dad trimmed his beard, put a ball cap on, trimmed his fingernails, got one of the guns in the home, and left. A couple hours maybe later, Nathan says his father came home. He heard the car pull in the driveway, and he heard a few gunshots. Nathan was sitting at the kitchen table. When he walked out, he saw feet, and he remembered that there were scrubs on the feet, and Bonnie worked in a nursing home, so she wore scrubs every day. He walked around the corner, and he saw Bonnie Woodward laying on the side of the house, dead. He saw his dad shoot her one more time.
Freed from his father's controlling presence, Nathan unloads the terrible burden he's carried for years.
This is where she laid.
Roger obtained this front loader from their property and ultimately picked up Bonnie's body, took her back to what was described by Monica as the burn site. Her deceased body was burnt in an attempt to get rid of the evidence. Following these multiple days of burning, they took that same front loader, scraped off the top few inches of soil at that burn site, and then dumped these ashes and dirt into a nearby creek that runs through their property. And then he also walked us to this area as well to point out this area.
He took them on a walkthrough, showed them where she was shot, showed them where the burn pile was, and then he came with investigators back to the police department where they had seized all of Roger Carroll's guns.
We showed him several guns, and he did point out a 9mm semi-automatic handgun at the time, and he had said that that was the one that his father had used on that day.
Nathan's testimony is shocking, but it's not enough to convict his father without physical evidence. Police obtain another search warrant, and this time they know exactly where to look.
After we learned where to look for evidence, another massive search happened. This time I would say over 100 law enforcement officers went out to the scene.
It was a meticulous search that happened for 3 days. The area next to the house, which would be the site where she was ultimately shot and killed, we did find shell casings, at least one that was a 9mm shell casing, 9mm being the same gun that was used and Nathan identified. We also found a 9mm firearm projectile.
But investigators worry that the days-long fire may have destroyed any ballistic markings that would match the bullet to the 9mm. So they send the evidence to firearms experts for specialized testing.
Bullets, by their very nature, are designed to survive heat. When they are fired, they undergo the friction of rubbing up against the barrel. which produces a lot of heat. Also, they're exposed to a lot of heat when the cartridge itself is designated and the gases are burning beside them or behind them. So they're able to withstand a great deal of heat. They took that bullet from the crime scene and they compared it to test fires from the semi-automatic 9mm weapon, and they looked at it under a comparison microscope and determined that that bullet was fired from that weapon.
It's a perfect match. At long last, investigators finally have their murder weapon, but what they don't have is a body.
At the burn site, we found some more shell casings, but also what appeared to be charred remains of bone fragments.
The bone fragments are too damaged by fire to yield any DNA, but there's still enough to build a case. On the strength of ballistics testing, along with the fingerprints and Nathan Carroll's eyewitness testimony against his father, Roger Carroll is finally charged with the murder of Bonnie Woodward.
On June 25th, 2010, Roger W. Carroll lured Bonnie Woodward from Madison County to a location in Jersey County, where he then ended her life by shooting her, and then concealed her death by placing her in a fire and burning her remains.
Roger was charged in Jersey County with 3 counts of first-degree murder and aggravated kidnapping and concealment of a homicidal death.
The trial was lengthy. It's in essence a no-body homicide. We never really were able to locate Bonnie's body, which is something that, very rare that you ever see.
I believe that there have been less than 500 cases in the world that have been tried and convicted without a body. It's very, very rare to try a case without a body, let alone get a conviction without a body.
10 years after Bonnie vanishes, Roger Carroll finally faces the jury.
Ultimately, we went to trial on 1 count of first-degree murder. The jury deliberated for approximately 3 to 4 hours, I believe, and they convicted him of first-degree murder.
Roger was very controlling. That was confirmed with the statements. That was something that I even perceived as how this family was ran back in 2010 when this case first came to them, is that he had a really strong hold on this family, over his wife, over his son.
People have blamed Nathan as being complicit in this murder, and that just is not the case.
Nathan ultimately coming forward was a big step in the investigation. He certainly could have kept that quiet.
He was a boy who had a murderer for a father. He was scared. He did what his father told him to do. Not only is he not a murderer, but he's sort of a hero, because it took a lot of guts for him to stand up in that courtroom and tell the truth. We couldn't have done any of this without him and his statement.
With his conviction finally secured, Bonnie's family can begin healing from their decade-long trauma.
The family knew that Roger was responsible. And this was more closure for them, knowing that all these years of Bonnie disappearing, and some people out there were saying that Bonnie just walked away or she left, which they knew wasn't true. They knew that something happened to their sister, to their mother. And this was a good conclusion for them to kind of put this thing to rest and start to move on. As difficult as it is for them to do that.
She had a lot of people that loved her, and she gave a lot of love to a lot of other people as well. So her family, to say that they were with me every minute of every day of that trial is an understatement. I talked to every one of them multiple times per day. They were present for all of it, and they, I think, breathed a big sigh of relief when it was over.
is an instant attraction between the tall, likable Trenton and the young, pregnant Amber.
They went to dinner and they never spent a night apart after that.
When secrets start to pile up, things can turn deadly. Especially when someone is about to lose everything and has easy access to a gun.
The definition of a sociopath is someone who lacks a conscience or the ability to empathize with others.
A murder that shakes the very foundations of small-town America and leaves everyone asking why. When people think of Michigan, Detroit, Motor City, and the birthplace of Motown are two things that might come to mind. Very few instantly think of northern Michigan, with its wild and untamed beauty, covered in forest and locked between three of the Great Lakes, Superior, Michigan, and Huron.
Levering is a small rural community in Emmett County. If you blink, you'll pass it on the way to the Mackinac Bridge to get to the UP, the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Very desolate, in the middle of nowhere.
Trenton Mallory is born and raised in Levering. He's known as Trading Trent because he's always doing internet deals and trading up for something better. He likes to buy and resell guns on different marketplace sites.
When I first met Trenton, I thought he was this big, goofy, 6.5-foot tall man. He was just amazing. I knew he was a person that I wanted to be friends with. His personality just reached out and grabbed you. I worked for a big box store, and he used to come in, and he was a distributor.
Amber grows up in Charlotte, Michigan, about 3 hours south of Levering.
When Amber was little, she always had the need to make people laugh, and she just found a way to do it so naturally. She was hysterical.
Amber was sweet as pie. She really was. She always smiled. She's a beautiful person inside and out.
Because of her excellent grades, Amber receives a scholarship to go to college. She doesn't stay happy there for long, coming home at Thanksgiving, already deciding never to go back. Disappointed and exasperated with Amber's behavior, Darlene feels once again it is another argument that ends with Amber getting her own way.
Amber got into the party life, and Amber got into having fun while they expected her to get good grades. She had a scholarship. She just didn't want to do it. She was with a boyfriend she had met, and she got pregnant. It just didn't work out, and there she was, home, pregnant, by herself.
With her boyfriend no longer in the picture, pregnant and living in her mom's basement, Darlene is unsure of Amber's future. But she has an idea. Amber and Trenton should meet.
They had so many common interests. I mean, they both liked the same sports teams. They were both into the outdoors, real people-oriented. They went to dinner, and they never spent a night apart after that.
They move in together immediately.
They kind of reminded you of a little old married couple. They just bicker, and then it was just a big joke. And their relationship was so full of love and energy. When I saw them together, it just made my heart beat. Because it was like Amber had finally found what she was really looking for.
Trouble soon strikes the happy couple. At 3 months old, their son is rushed by a helicopter downstate to the Children's Hospital with an enlarged heart. He is diagnosed with cardiomyopathy.
And it was so severe, he had to be on a transplant list, and he had a Berlin heart. It was actually a heart on the outside of his body that pumped the blood through him.
The medical care for this child was putting them in a financial ruin.
Medications upward of $5,000 a week are vital to their son staying alive and not covered by insurance. To make matters even worse, their son develops leukemia generated by the cardiomyopathy and medication. 4 weeks before her son is to get his heart transplant, Amber and Trenton find out she's pregnant.
The heart transplant took a real toll on them. I mean, they were both exhausted. At one point, Amber just was like, I can't deal with the relationship and this. And Trenton was like, no, we're a family. You don't walk away from family. We will work on this.
Amber needs a break from the stress of the overwhelming medical bills and looking after her constantly sick child. She decides to head to the casino one night and blow off some steam. To her surprise, she wins $1,200.
Date night was the casino. Amber got Trenton going, and then they both just really liked it. They would go to the casino at least once a week.
Things finally seem on the upswing for the devoted couple. The oldest boy has had his heart transplant and is in remission from his leukemia, and their youngest son is born healthy.
It just made my heart beat because it was like Amber had finally found what she was really looking for.
Amber didn't just slide over the bar. She wanted to be the best. She wanted to be the best mom in school. She wanted to be the best partner to her husband. She wanted to be the best, everything.
The morning of March 6, 2014, starts off bright, cold, and crystal clear at minus 21 degrees Fahrenheit. It's also a busy morning for Amber. Her first stop is to buy snacks for school at the local store.
Amber had left the residence that morning to take her kids to school. She left about 7:05 a.m. When she left, Trent was sleeping in bed. Normally they took the bus. This morning she decided to drive him to school. She went to a small store in Pellston where she purchased a snack for her son to take to class that day.
Next stop is to take her younger son, who has been sick for a few days, to the local clinic.
And while she's sitting there waiting for her son to be evaluated by the doctor, she texts Trent at about 9:13 a.m. with no response from him. After they leave Quick Care, they go to pick up a prescription for the son.
Amber makes her last purchase at 9:46 a.m. before heading off to her sister Amy's house for a quick visit. Amy lives with her partner Money, about 20 minutes away from Levering, but no one is at their place, so they head home, arriving at around 10:30. Little does Amber and her son know what is waiting for them at their home. The morning of March 6, 2014, starts off bright, cold, and crystal clear. It's also a busy morning for Amber. Little does Amber and her son know what is waiting for them at their home.
The initial call was March 6, 2014 from Amber Smith. She indicated that when she returned home that morning, the door was ajar to the residence.
And she walks inside and she sees the house in disarray. It wasn't like how she left it. There's pill bottles all over the place. The drawers are pulled out. So she just gets inside the house and sees this.
She stated that she did not see Trent, backed out, and went to the car and called 911. The Emmett County Sheriff's Department deputy responded to the scene, made contact with her.
Okay, so the inside door is open.
Which I just thought was weird. But, I mean, Trent is the most forgetful person that I know, so I was like, shut the door, maybe they get up.
And I'm sorry, so are you outside when you call 911?
I told Carson to get his boots back on and get back outside, which he did. And I told him to get in his car seat just because I knew it was safe inside the car. I have my mom and I sat in the car with him.
There was some medications that were in the kitchen cupboard that were thrown down onto the counter as though somebody was going through the medications. There was a small Century beige style safe that was open, laying on the floor. You know, the contents of the medicine cabinet and the cabinet where the sink was at had been thrown askew onto the floor.
they had a number of guns. Upon entering the bedroom, the deputy could see that there was a subject laying in bed. He had the covers, blankets up to his neck. There was obviously visible sign of trauma to the subject's head, and he was deceased in bed.
There's no doubt in the deputy's mind that he has found Trenton Mallory. A detective soon arrives on the scene and starts speaking to Amber, hoping to get a clearer picture as to what has happened. As hard as it is to question someone minutes after they've learned their loved one has been murdered, it's imperative to find out as much as possible and as quickly as possible about the victim.
There is absolutely nothing to say, to do, to make you feel any better. This is what I'm terribly sorry for this. That's what I'm here for. I'm going to for you to go. I gotta ask you a lot of questions there. As you may know, or may not, time's up the essence in a situation like this, okay?
The reporting person always needs to be clear. Spouse, a fiance, a girlfriend, anybody that's close to the deceased. You're going to want to clear them with an alibi or at least verify their story the best you can and get a better picture of what's going on.
At the beginning, the world is wide open as far as potential suspects goes. Trenton is Mr. Nice Guy. He is a hard-working family man. There's nobody that can be found who would say anything negative about Trent, or who can give a reason as to why someone would want to kill him.
Who doesn't like Trent? Who would be his biggest enemies?
Everybody likes Trent. He's such a good guy. Everybody likes him.
Enemies?
I don't think so.
Trenton's the most amazing man ever. I couldn't love him more if I'd given birth to him. Trenton was so special and so kind. He would do anything for anybody.
If this in fact is a homicide, if it is, I would assume that you would cooperate to the fullest. That means taking computers, phones, anything.
That's fine.
With the cooperation of a grief-stricken Amber secured, police start tracking movements, calls, and texts between her and Trenton and others involved in their lives.
Inside of the bedroom where Trent was located deceased, there was a gun cabinet. In there was approximately 5 long guns. Underneath the bed in a case was another long gun. And then there was another long gun that was propped up against the closet door in the bedroom, along with ammunition and other hunting supplies.
Trenton's body is removed by the medical examiner. The autopsy shows that Trenton has died from a single gunshot wound to the left side of his head, an inch or two behind his ear.
The projectile used to shoot Trent was a .22 Super X long rifle bullet. The spent projectile removed from Trent's head at that time by the autopsy appeared to be .22 caliber, which would be consistent with the empty casing found next to the bed. Medical examiner placed the time of death on March 6, 2014 at 9 a.m. And based on the alibi that was presented by Amber Smith at that time, she was not at home at 9 a.m. as the time of death that was indicated on Trent's death certificate.
Police officers came and knocked on my door and asked me if I knew Trent Mallory, and I said yes, and they told me that he had passed away. And I was like, where did the accident happen? And they're like, he was murdered.
Amber Smith comes home to discover their house has been broken into and ransacked. Even more horrible, her fiancé Trenton is found murdered in the master bedroom, lying face down on the bed with severe head
it was very plausible that this was a break-in, and Trent just did not wake up, and somebody actually shot him while attempting to steal stuff from his house.
What's going to happen at this point is basically a bunch of investigators are going to be at your house for a period of time. Okay? All right. Now, when you pulled up to the driveway, you saw the inside door was open. The screen was shut, but it's always a little ajar. When you walked into the house, did you yell for Trent at all? No, because I had no gas to sleep in.
The world was wide open as far as to potential suspects and who would want to kill Trent, who would want to break into their house, who would know that Amber and the kids had left at the time they did. So it was a matter of digging into Trent's life and to Amber's life and to the family's life just to see, is there something that we don't know about? Is there's something going on?
Detectives begin coming up with various scenarios and suspects, and slowly start to eliminate those with an alibi.
How did the person get in the house? Was there forced entry? Did they break into the house? I mean, how did they gain entry to the house to commit this crime?
They're way out in the middle of nowhere.
There's so many people that he's always dealing with from work, and people swing by, and he tells me who they are, but if you understood Trent, there are so many people that he knows and that know him, and they'll stop by or will swing by someone else's house.
Trent was buying items like from sporting goods stores, trail cams, and different kind of weaponry, hunting rifles and hunting gear, and he was buying them and then selling them on Facebook Marketplace.
They kind of started looking at that aspect of trading Trent was his nickname, that maybe he just got in with the wrong person.
So we're basically in the middle of nowhere, right? Basically in the middle of nowhere. And why, if I were to tell you that it's a possibility, okay, that somebody caused the death here, that somebody caused the death to Trenton, who do you think would do such a thing?
Nobody would do that. Trent buys and trades a lot of stuff, so there's always people coming and going, buying stuff and selling stuff.
People involved in the trading and bartering world are not always what or who they seem to be. Many people post items for sale with descriptions that are not always accurate. The old saying, buyer beware, still rings true, especially when buying, selling, and trading guns and ammunition. Occasionally, stories of deals gone wrong will reach police.
Her husband says that Trent had told him that he was dealing with a person down in Big Rapids with guns.
That guy was so mad. Trent was mad too, because he drove out there, and it wasn't just for a gun. She had a tractor for sale, like a garden tractor, and they were selling it really cheap. And then I was like, okay, well, if it, runs fine, then we'll definitely buy it. And he got there and said that he didn't want to buy the tractor because, it wasn't in the shape that he thought it was in. He just started yelling at him, swearing at him. And
Trent?
Yeah, and Trent was like, well, I'll still buy the rifle or the shotgun from you, but, I don't want the tractor. And they just went off on it.
Okay. You know the names of these people?
I have no idea. I know they blocked us on Facebook, so we can't even see that.
People are selling guns, they use guns to trade and barter in rural areas. None of those guns were taken. They were just left there. I mean, if anything, you can get money from guns, but they were left behind.
They had TVs, they had trail cams, they had hunting equipment, they had a lot of guns, all things that would be particularly desirable for somebody who had a nefarious intent. Okay? They had some money. They did have some cash on hand, that there'd been a big fundraiser in the area. They'd gotten some cash. And they had drugs. Okay? Not street drugs. They weren't like that, okay? But they had drugs that were marketable, maybe. Guns, money, and drugs. That's what drives the world, right?
That's a red flag. Why would somebody break and shoot somebody and not take anything? Well, it's telling me somebody wanted somebody dead.
If the motive is not to steal anything, what other reasons would someone have to want Trenton dead?
Is there a reason why anybody would want to take Trent out of the picture? And we really struggled to find too many people that really fit that bill. We did learn of that Amber did have an affair within the last few months prior to that.
After the transplant, he had started contacting a previous boyfriend and started, doing things that just were so out of character. It was like she needed to escape her own life, and it didn't turn out very well.
How well do you know Ryan Hunter?
Yeah, I used to work with him.
How well do you know?
He cheated on his wife with me. Trying to work there.
Okay. And when was the last time you contacted him?
I talked to him 2011.
When was the last time you talked?
We talked on Facebook. Maybe it was 2012. I don't know. It was a couple years ago.
Right. Well, it was actually 6 to 8 months ago.
Excuse me?
Correct. We have those.
6 to 8 months ago?
That's correct.
Law enforcement always has to make sure that anyone having an affair with the partner of someone who is murdered is also not an accomplice or guilty of that murder. In short, to eliminate the affair as a motive for the murder. In northern Michigan, detectives continue to focus on breaking and entering, with Trenton Mallory's hobby of buying and selling guns as a possible motive for his murder.
Why would somebody break and shoot somebody and not take anything? Well, it's telling me somebody wanted somebody dead.
One thing that interests detectives is that Amber has yet to ask how Trenton died.
Do you know how he died?
Nobody.
Huh?
Nobody.
Are you curious? There's several different ways that a homicide can occur, correct? Do you agree? So he was shot. But it appears that he was sleeping when this occurred. Look at this from the detective's point of view, okay? We're in broad daylight. House in the middle of nowhere. Right? There's a truck parked in the driveway. Okay? The door's open. There's neighbors. Alright? And then all of a sudden a person is shot in his sleep. Does that sound odd to you?
We interviewed Amber, and the details changed. There was just little things that would change over time because it's hard to keep track of all those inconsistencies, which made her a prime suspect, but certainly didn't put us over the top where we could charge her at that point.
Another thing detectives are soon able to rule out is whether this is a burglary with narcotics being the primary goal. It's been observed that the kitchen cupboards and medicine cabinets have been gone through, and prescriptions and pill bottles scattered everywhere.
I see a lot of medication in there. Who's that for?
There's antibiotics in there. A bunch of demo work done. Marshall takes meds. We buy a lot of over-the-counter cold products and stuff when they're 88 cents at Walmart. Oh, it's just a bunch of random stuff.
Her son had a lot of medications, being a transplant person, and they thought maybe if he had narcotics or something, but these medicines were very dangerous for anybody who didn't need them. But they thought maybe it was for the medications, because we do have a lot of drug problems here.
Like safe, like a fireproof safe, and that's open. Is that usually locked?
Well, it's locked, but the keys set right on top of it. Like, we're not going to safe with it.
What?
And if we leave somewhere, we take the keys with us. Like, if we go, away for a day or two. Or if, someone comes over to babysit, we take the keys away. But usually
money got into the safe, but they took our money, you know, which, whatever. But I don't know why anybody would hurt Trent, because if they needed the money that bad, he could just give it to him.
One of the big challenges detectives face is the discrepancy in statements between family members and friends. Often, people remember things differently for a number of reasons. Some of those reasons are innocent, others are not. In the case of Amber's statement, things are not adding up the way they should.
Sounds like you guys had this amazing relationship.
Well, it was. I mean, you know, I've known Trent for a long time. We went on a blind date 10 years ago. And I chased that boy, and, you know, he just didn't want anything to do with me. And, you know, we were the greatest friends. But then I decided to go off and get engaged to somebody else, and all of a sudden he was interested in me. It was fun, and then Marshall came along, and, you know, he loves kids. Like, there's nothing in this world that Trent ever wanted more than to be a dad. Like, he just also has 4 kids. We realized that we know each other better than most married couples know each other because we're best friends. And, you know, we tried to date, and then the stuff happened with Marshall, and, you know, it was just too much stress for me, like trying to deal with a dying child, and I was pregnant. But then after Carson was born, you know, we figured it out.
Investigators are having a hard time reconciling Amber's insistence that this is a burglary gone wrong with the facts of the case.
Amber tried to claim that this was a burglary. There were a few things that were disheveled. The victim was killed with a .22 rifle. Despite the fact that she claimed this was a burglary, forced entry into the home, there were numerous other guns in the house that were untouched, and the murder weapon was missing. As the investigation unfolds, it turns out that Amber and Trenton had been advertising this particular .22 rifle for sale. She actually had held it up with the serial number on one of the photographs, proudly advertising it for sale. It's the one gun that's missing from their home. At first she claimed she had no knowledge of that gun, she never held that gun, and later looking at her social media, she's got the gun in her hand, and she's advertising it for sale.
Even though under Michigan law, prosecutors do not need to prove a motive to get a conviction, investigators still want to know the why of the case. Usually, so does a jury when it involves murder.
What we found out in digging into their finances was their house was in foreclosure, one of their vehicles was being repossessed, they were severely behind on other loans as well, they had a mountain of credit card debt, and in addition to all of that, Amber was taking out payday Friday loans continuously at 300% interest just to get money. Why? Because she had a gambling addiction. She spent an exorbitant amount of money on gambling. Most, if not all, of these loans and this debt were taken out by her, and they were in Trenton's name. She tried to take out a loan in his name even after he was murdered.
As far as anybody knew, their relationship was still real good. But I thought, as Amber's mom, I knew what was out of characteristic for her. And when I heard her calling creditors saying Trent had changed his phone number and she would give him hers, all of a sudden my mailbox in Charlottesville, which is like 70 miles away, is filling up with their mail. She's just like, I don't want to burden Trenton with all the knowing about all these bills because he's so worried about them. She just got very manipulative. Amber had come to me at one point and told me that, you know, she was really in a financial bind. I took a loan out and I loaned Amber the money. Well, 6 months later is when all these bills started arriving in my mailbox. And I said, Amber, I took a loan out. I bailed you out of your financial trouble. What is all this? Well, she had over $25,000 in debt at the casino alone. And plus they had credit card debt. She had stopped paying the mortgage. The house was in foreclosure. The car had been repoed a few times. And in fact, one time when it got repoed, she told Trenton that her and I got into an argument and she threatened to run me over with the car, so the police took her car. And he believed it. I had been watching Amber unravel for months. I mean, she was doing things like alienating the whole family against each other. When Amber gets into a situation, her first instinct is to just totally do away with it. I mean, there was no Amber sitting down talking to Trenton about their finances or anything. She just killed him.
As fingers continue to point to Amber, detectives do their best to try and get some answers from her that make sense.
I gotta tell you that there's a piece of information or piece of evidence that we have. It's in the lab right now. We're there. I can't tell you anything. It could be anything from blood, fingerprints, shell casings. It's been 22 shells. We have fingerprint on a 22 shell, DNA on a 22 shell. Okay. Those type of things. Right? And we found the spent shell that was used. Okay. There's DNA. Right? Is there any possible way that your DNA can be on that shell?
There's a lot of 22 shells discarded at my house. I mean, we were shooting the 22.
We know that that shell is the shell that was used to strike Trent, okay? What I'm asking you is a simple question, right? Is that 22 shell the one that we have, okay, that potentially has a fingerprint and DNA on that shell? Is that going to come back to you?
No.
You better be absolutely certain, because I'm telling you right now, what you're saying is not necessarily true.
I can't explain it for you.
Well, why is that?
I did not shoot Trent, so you're saying my DNA would be on that spent shell? I would say no.
In northern Michigan, Trenton Mallory has been murdered, and his fiancée, Amber, is under suspicion.
I mean, there was no Amber sitting down talking to Trenton about their finances or anything. She just killed him.
The one thing that was missing in the case was the murder weapon. We had a pretty good circumstantial case against her, but without that murder weapon, we didn't have the smoking gun, so to speak. And several months later, when the snow melted at her sister's house, her sister sees this .22 rifle buried in the snow. Did the right thing, called the police.
Detectives strike gold when they receive a call from Amy, Amber's sister, telling them she thinks the missing murder weapon is sticking out of a snowbank at her partner Mike's house. Quickly, detectives persuade Amy to allow them to record a conversation with Amber, asking her about the gun.
Hello, who's that you talk to? I went up to Mike's house, and when I was leaving there, I noticed something in the snowbank, and I found it. I put it there yesterday. I was gonna stop at Mike's house today and talk to it. You put the gun in the yard? I just bought it because I wanted something for home protection. What did you do with it? I didn't touch it. Oh, okay. Are you kidding me? I didn't know it. And when it looks a lot like the gun that you have an X-ray on. They said there was a gun right there. I don't understand it. I freaked right out. If you could go right now and get it because it's gotta get out of there. All right, I'll be there with you.
Amber makes up this ridiculous story about having bought a gun for protection after Trenton was killed, and she was just basically storing it in the snowbank at her sister's house.
When Amber was little, she was as stubborn as they came. I mean, she was headstrong. And Amber, even as a little girl, could never accept defeat. And if Amber failed at something, she took it so hard that she would find ways to cover it up.
I totally misunderstood what you said to me. I was buying a gun from a person named Snow, and that's when she meet me at my house. Up until gun in your bank. I just don't get this stuff. I don't either. I love you, but I mean, you didn't do this, did you? No, I didn't do it.
So the sister said, well, come out here, get rid of this thing. Come pick it up. And of course, the police were there waiting for her.
The recording.
Amber does show up in her vehicle, which is recorded, and you can see she gets out of her car and she's kind of looking around, and she's physically starts to use her hands to dig in the snowbank looking for the rifle, but was unable to locate it.
Just go back to her car.
It was no longer there because the police had removed it. They confronted her about it, and of course, she did what sociopaths do. She lied and denied anything. I talked to her right in the driveway and told her that, we had retrieved a gun from the snowbank, and that she had just talked to Amy about the gun. You don't have any idea? Because it appears to maybe be the same gun that we're looking for.
That's what she told me.
This is the point right now. The story started to unravel. Okay. We told enough things that are half truths, untruths, and just flat out lies at this point that they're all coming back to bite you.
You don't have an explanation. You put her weapon inside your sister's snowbank. You didn't. You didn't put that gun in that snowbank.
We've now collected the murder weapon that killed your fiance out of your sister's driveway. Okay? And that, where do you think that is, Ray?
I have no idea.
That's at the lab being processed for a lot of different things. She denied knowing anything about the gun being in the snowbank. So no matter what you confronted her with, she just denied.
When a gun is recovered, before it comes to the lab for an analysis, it's sent to another lab. It's sent to like a serological lab where they swab the gun for DNA and fingerprints. Now keep in mind, this gun was in a wet environment, it was in snow. Your probability becomes lower to try to get any kind of physical evidence. Not impossible, you still can, but it's very difficult. I believe in this particular instance, they did remove some fingerprints off of it. They had her prints on file, and they compared them to Amber's prints, and they found out to be a match.
In a case like this, you want to have all that forensic evidence processed before you actually make arrests. So in this case, we chose not to because we were still waiting. Now that we had the rifle, they could do the test firing of the rifle. And in that process, they're going to compare the firing pin from that rifle to the firing pin from the casing that was retrieved out of the bedroom where Trent was killed, along with the actual spent projectile that was removed from Trent's head with the rifling of the rifle itself. Once you have those pieces of the puzzle, it becomes very clear that rifle retrieved from the snowbank is the same rifle that was posted by Amber and also was the one that killed Trent. In her alibi, in her recitation of the events of that morning, Amber clearly detailed where she had been. And one of the places she said she stopped that morning was her sister's house. So her own statement connected her to where the gun was eventually located after the snow melt the following spring. The ballistic analysis confirmed that the casing located in the bedroom next to Trent's body was matched to the rifle, the 10-22 Ruger rifle that was recovered from the snowbank. The projectile removed from Trent's head was also matched to the 10-22 Ruger removed from the snowbank. And when the gun was retrieved out of the snowbank, there was actually a live round in the chamber that was ejected, which was consistent with the same ammunition used to kill Trent.
Amber committing the crime was all about she couldn't admit that she had really messed up. They were losing their home and everything, and Trent had no idea. She had hid it from him so well.
I guess I can't get inside Amber's head for why she killed Trent. After talking to her numerous times, she is a total narcissist. It's all about Amber. The truth's gonna be that you shot your fiance in bed while he was sleeping with a rifle that you put in your sister's driveway. It's gonna make you look like this cold-blooded killer and thinks about nothing except yourself. When the gun was found in the snowbank and turned over to the forensic laboratory, the case basically turned into a slam dunk against Amber. At that point, it was frosting on the cake. There was indisputable evidence at that point that Amber was guilty.
Even Amber's perfect alibi, which she has so carefully constructed, would not stand up in court.
We got a guilty verdict, I would say within a half hour. Amber Smith was convicted for first-degree murder and felony firearm. Now, that conviction is an automatic life sentence without parole. She is getting sent to prison forever, and it's never going to be out in her lifetime.
I'm 100% sure she's guilty. I felt like I lost a son and a daughter.
Everybody said he was the nicest guy in the world. He was the best father, not only for his own son, but her son as well.
Never in my wildest dreams did I think she was capable of taking a life. Especially someone like Trenton who gave her the world.
Life is quieter in the town of Petoskey, Michigan. And that's how Lyle and Carol Kopinkoski like it.
They were living a comfortable but very simple life.
But little do they know, everything is about to change when Lyle is found dead. As the news spreads about the case, authorities struggle to find clues, a suspect, and a motive.
We don't have carjackings. We don't have inner city crime. It was highly unusual.
Police aren't sure if they're dealing with a man who's taken his own life, or if there's something more nefarious at play.
Nothing was missing from the car. His coffee was actually still warm in his thermos.
As the clock ticks down, investigators rush to find a lead before the case goes cold. And before the truth behind Lyle's death vanishes without a trace. With a population close to 5,600, Petoskey, Michigan is a hidden treasure along the state's lower peninsula. A place where sunseekers flock in the summer months and adventurers brave in the winter. The administrative center of Emmett County, Petoskey is also a former haunt of author Ernest Hemingway, who set some of his stories in the small town.
We have a lot of money here, a lot of summer people. The population increases fourfold in the summer. And we're right on Lake Michigan, Little Traverse Bay. It's a beautiful community.
You can do pretty much anything outdoors here, hunting, fishing, hiking.
On the outskirts of Petoskey is the home of Lyle Kopinkoski, a heavy machine operator for a local construction company. Lyle is a simple man with simple pleasures. His love of auto racing is a bond that him and his brother, Carl, share. He's a loyal husband to his wife, Carol, whom he's been married to for nearly 40 years. Lyle is a creature of habit, whose daily routine is to come home from work, fix himself a drink, eat dinner, and then spend his evenings watching television.
Throughout the whole investigation, I did not hear one bad thing about Lyle. He is a great guy, great uncle, good person, very hardworking.
Carol Kopinkoski is a woman of many trades. She's taken on several careers throughout the years, including owning a restaurant, which burned to the ground in the 1980s. In October of 2012, she works at a local grocery store, a pizza place, and she cleans houses. She builds up her reputation around town as a hard worker, someone willing to take on many tasks at once, a trait both her and Lyle possess. And for all their hard work, the Kopinkoskis reward themselves with the things they love most in life.
Their idea of fun was heading to Michigan Speedway to see all of the auto races or NASCAR. They kept to themselves. They're definitely family-driven people.
By all accounts, the Kopinkoskis are like any other married couple. But their world is tragically rocked on a cool fall day in October of 2012. Earlier in the day, on October 2nd, 2012, Carl passes his brother's truck, which is parked down a country road.
Carl is Lyle's brother who lives a quarter-mile away from where the truck was located, saw Lyle's truck and did not see Lyle.
He slows and examines the scene. Assuming his brother has gone hunting, Carl continues on, but keeps the image in his head throughout the rest of the day. Carol arrives home around 9 p.m. after working all day. Immediately, she notices Lyle's truck is nowhere to be seen. When she enters the house, she finds that Lyle isn't in his usual spot, watching television. She calls out for her husband, but no one answers. Worry then starts to set in, which is only amplified when she listens to the unheard messages left on her voicemail. They're all from Lyle's boss. Lyle didn't show up for work that day.
Lyle worked for many years, and by all accounts was a great employee. Very consistent, reliable, didn't call in sick, never missed days of work, was always on time.
Carol calls Carl, asking if he's seen Lyle. Carl hasn't, until he remembers passing by Lyle's truck earlier in the day.
They lived out in the country, and, it was not near a lot of other houses or anything like that. There was a lot of space in between them and any neighbors. And Lyle's brother actually discovered the truck there and stopped, I believe, in the evening. It was obviously highly suspicious that his brother's truck was still there many hours later on the side of the road.
And that's when the call came in that we possibly had a missing person.
The small police force of Petoskey arrive at the scene. Aside from what looks to be an abandoned vehicle, nothing appears out of ordinary at first. There are no noticeable signs of a struggle, no apparent bloodstains, and no visible weapons. Though the scenario of what's happened is still uncertain, authorities know time is of the essence. They need to find Lyle, and fast, so they call in reinforcements.
At that point, they called out search and rescue team, where they then would comb what was literally cow pastures and looking for a body, looking for a weapon, looking for any type of evidence that would show Lyle's whereabouts.
With police at the scene working to piece together the events of that night, investigators head to the Kopinkoski home, where Carol nervously waits. Carol tells the authorities her and Lyle spent some time in their second home in Allenson, about 20 minutes from Petoskey, over the weekend. When they returned on Sunday night, there was something different about Lyle. Something was off.
She explained to me the night before that Lyle had been drinking. Lyle had what she had termed was hallucinating, and she was basically babysitting him.
According to Carol, Lyle mixed alcohol with his depression and anxiety medication the night before, rendering him in a strange, hallucinatory state.
In his intoxication, he was falling over chairs, had walked behind a television. She had even mentioned that he possibly was going to the bathroom behind the television, really acting erratic. During the time of babysitting him, he had mentioned that he wanted to go to work. He needed to go to work. Well, this was at 2 o'clock in the morning. So she kept trying to get him to go back to bed. But she did make him lunch, as she says she does every day, and make coffee and try to wait it out until it was time for him to actually go to work.
Carol tells officers she returns home Monday evening, and only then learns that Lyle didn't make it to work. She calls Carl to see if Lyle is over there. That phone call triggers Carl to investigate his brother's truck. Carol fears the worst. Lyle's depression has worsened over the past little while. What if Lyle has taken his own life? Meanwhile, investigators at the scene continue to scour every fragment of land for something, anything that could lead them to Lyle. But hours have passed, and they're no closer to finding him. Spirits are beginning to dwindle.
I think they were just trying to piece together what happened. I don't know if they thought it might be a suicide even.
Then, at approximately 12:30 a.m. on October 3rd, 2012, Lyle's body is located.
It wasn't until approximately 2 hours later that they actually located Lyle in the ditch, maybe 15 to 20 feet from where they were standing in the middle of the road. The way the ditch was located made it very difficult to see the bottom of the ditch, and so they were not able to locate the body because of the darkness and the way the lights were. We even had a dog in the area that we called out, and the dog was also unable to find the body, but eventually a rescue worker had walked upon it.
Investigators are stunned as they try to wrap their heads around the horrific sight before them. As they wait for the medical examiner to arrive, they can't help but ask themselves, could Lyle have died by suicide? Or is there something more malicious going on in the quiet town of Petoskey?
Put a knife to the throat of Lyle and basically threatened to kill him.
They were looking for a .38 revolver, a murder weapon.
There was highlighted pages to cover up evidence.
On the night of October 2nd, 2012, Carl Kopinkoski finds his brother Lyle's truck abandoned down a gravel road on the outskirts of town, not far from where Carl lives. He immediately calls the police, and an investigation into Lyle's whereabouts begins.
The police started investigating, and a search took place, and several hours later they found his body in a ditch within 20 feet of the truck, out on the side of the road in a rural area.
The search and rescue team has passed the area several times before, but because of the terrain of the ditch, the darkness of the night, and the lights from all the vehicles, Lyle's body has initially been missed. As authorities wait for the medical examiner before moving Lyle's body, his truck is searched.
Nothing was touched. Valuable tools were located in the back of the truck. So carjacking, theft, though we couldn't rule it out, but it was highly unlikely that that was the case.
No weapons are found in or around the area. The only thing that seems strange to investigators is that the driver's seat is pulled forward to a height that doesn't match that of Lyle's, indicating that he may not have been the last person to drive his vehicle, and making the theory of suicide slightly less plausible. Police get more details from Lyle's wife, Carol. She claims Lyle's been seeing a therapist for several months now, and she doesn't rule out suicide as a means to his death. But that theory is quickly dismissed once Lyle's body is removed from the ditch.
He was was lying face down, so they had not rolled the body to see if the gun was located underneath. That's when I arrived on scene, where I then rolled the body and could not find a weapon. Then I noticed that he had gunshot wounds to his back. At that point, I call it a homicide.
5 bullet wounds are discovered in Lyle's body, 4 in his back, and 1 in his left temple.
It was pretty evident at the scene that Lyle had got shot on the side of the road and at some point rolled in or pushed into the ditch. He did have gunshot wounds to the side of his head, and we felt that that was the last gunshot that had killed him.
It's not apparent that he was in a fight. It was apparent that he was intentionally murdered.
Due to where he was located and where the truck was located, my thought at that point was that he was running away, and that at some point he had seen the gun, and he was running, away from the threat.
Now, with the murder investigation underway, the questions begin piling up. But the one thing on everyone's mind is, where is the gun that killed Lyle Kopinkoski?
Recovering a firearm with this particular case, it is close to solving the crime. That firearm will tell you a lot of things before the analysis. Who owned it, any prints on it, anything like that.
Investigators continue examining the scene, sweeping for evidence of any kind, for the murder weapon, or for any bullet casings, but nothing is found.
There could be 2 reasons why there are not gunshot cases. One, the shooter could have picked them up. Most of the time, it's not likely, but the shooter could have picked them up. Second, could have been a revolver. The revolver is where the casings stay in the cylinder. They're not discharged. So, if I were to put my eggs in a basket, I would say the gun was used was a revolver.
The only hope now is in the hands of the medical examiner. If a bullet is lodged in Lyle's body, that could help authorities confirm that a revolver was in fact the weapon used to murder Lyle. Investigators take their questions of firearms to Carol, who confirms there are 2 in the Kopinkoski household: a .380 handgun and a small caliber rifle. Authorities ask about a revolver, but Carol denies having one, claiming there are no other weapons in her possession. The guns are taken for processing and to rule Carol out as a suspect.
In a homicide, everybody's a suspect at that point. So we didn't have any concrete information. We didn't have anybody dancing in the street waving their hands saying they did it. And of course, in that type of situation, the first person you want to speak to is a spouse to lock in key information.
Do you know what has transpired at the scene?
No.
Okay, you don't know that. We had the crime lab come up, and he has multiple gunshot wounds. Okay? No, I'm not kidding.
Authorities also begin speaking with the community in and around Petoskey, specifically those who knew Lyle well, all in the search for more leads. Several people come forward with information about that night. One witness comes forward, claiming to have seen a man near Lyle's truck the night of the murder.
We get up to here and we see that man walking and camera, and we're just like, it's already 9 o'clock, why is he heading out? We didn't see him carrying anything off, and that's another thing that fucks with us. Why are you walking into the woods, no rifle, no bow, nothing? Nothing fit. Just that whole day, we're going through this, and like, man, then we get the phone call, and it's like, somebody got shot, man.
Could this man be Lyle? Or could it be the person responsible for his death? A second witness contacts police with a different accounting.
Were there any lights on inside the car or any exterior lights on the car? No. Did it appear to be running?
Nope. Like I said, it was early in the morning. I was kind of in a hurry, but I didn't notice anything abnormal. And like I say, in other words, the first thing that struck me was that
someone broke down, and so I was looking for someone walking.
And you saw no one though.
No one. Okay. It just seems strange that it was pulled, not just off of the road, but then back half out. And on a slope like that.
Unfortunately, nothing substantial comes from the eyewitnesses, and investigators have yet to pinpoint a suspect or motive. But a stunning turn of events occurs when they speak to Carl, who tells police some shocking information.
There wasn't a single family member or anybody that came forward stating that Lyle had an enemy, except for one, and that was John Ernst.
He believes Carol is cheating on Lyle with John Ernst, her business partner and longtime friend.
As far as Carol's affair is concerned, many people told us that she had been seeing John Ernst romantically for many years. People had seen them together. Some of their friends had seen them romantically, staying together in the same room. So it was clear that Carol was having an affair, and the affair was with this John Ernst.
Lyle was very aware that Carol had been spending a lot of time with John. So aware that he had talked to Carl about it, he had talked to family members about it, he had talked to Carol about it. Carol had talked to me and admitted to me that Lyle had been asking about John on various occasions.
With the news of what appears to be a happy marriage being anything but, authorities sway their focus onto Carol's rumored lover, John Ernst. And as the investigation digs deeper and word spreads, an anonymous tip leads them to believe they may have found their main suspect.
John put a knife to the throat of Lyle Kopakowski and basically threatened to kill him.
Police discover that Lyle Kopakowski has been shot multiple times and that the murder weapon is nowhere to be found. After Lyle's brother, Carl, comes forward with a bit of shocking information about Lyle's wife, Carol, authorities begin to suspect that John Ernst, whom Carol is rumored to be having an affair with, may know something about Lyle's murder. An anonymous tip also comes forward about an altercation between Lyle and John, solidifying investigators' suspicions.
I don't know if you're aware of this gentleman by the name of John Ernst, who the summer before last did a family function, put a knife to the throat of Lyle Kopakowski and basically threatened to kill him. So this gentleman, according to his entire side of the family, has quite a propensity for violence. He's known to have had some animosity and made a physical threat and held the knife to his throat.
Lyle confronted John Ernst at one point. There was a physical altercation between them. I'm very confident that Lyle was very frustrated with the fact that Carol was seeing somebody else, was seeing John.
And learning that situation really piqued my interest because it was John Ernst, it was Carol's lover, and it was a knife to Lyle's throat. That's the only story I got involving Lyle in any type of altercation or having any sort of enemy.
With this startling new information, John Ernst is now high on the list of suspects. Is it possible that his rumored affair with Carol has taken a deadly turn?
I told the Detective Sumter, that we needed to interview John Ernst. The problem with the case was that John Ernst had moved out of the area, did not live in Petoskey any longer, was staying in Tennessee.
They reach out to John and inform him of Lyle's passing.
I'm confused. It wasn't health related? No. Wow. And I have to be honest with you, the reason why I'm calling you is it's rumored that you and Carol are having an affair. Yeah, it's been going around for years. We're good friends. Right. Been friends since high school. Absolutely certain, because you're a little hesitant and I'm concerned they know something more. A little nervous to tell me. Now, I knew that he wasn't feeling well. His health was an issue, but I'm stunned.
He had no knowledge about the crime. He denied having an affair with her. He said that they were just friends, and he basically knew nothing about it.
Without any solid evidence to back them up, police can't pin this on John just yet.
He had a rock-solid alibi. He was in Tennessee at the time of the murder, on the day of the murder.
Police bring Carol in for another round of questioning. She retells the story of the last time she saw her husband. But as Carol speaks, officers realize something crucial. Her stories aren't matching. Originally, Carol claims she hadn't seen Lyle the evening of his murder.
The last time you saw him was what?
That morning, it was around 5:30.
But upon questioning once more, she states she returns home the evening of October 2nd, 2012, and finds Lyle acting completely erratic, wanting to go to work, even though it was the evening and he only works days.
She told me that she pulled his truck out of the garage and she allowed him, in what she claimed to be an intoxicated state, but she allowed him to get into the truck and drive to work in an unknown direction. That was odd to me. One, the fact that she had actually felt the need to pull the truck out of the garage, and two, letting her husband of many years jump in the truck and go to work highly intoxicated.
Well, we think that he was shot earlier in the night, meaning your story would be true. You see what I'm saying? There's no blood in his car, alright? There were no rounds or nothing. The driver's seat of the car pulled way up. Okay, such as a smaller person would have driven the car.
Police begin to believe Carol may know more about Lyle's murder than she's letting on.
Is there something more that you want to tell me?
No, I don't know anything more. I just upset that you didn't think I would do something like this. I wouldn't do it.
I didn't say that you did.
Because when I'm in a question like this, am I the guilty one here or what?
An autopsy is performed on Lyle. The medical team is able to extract several bullet fragments from his body, including one from his back that contains an identifiable groove pattern. The bullet is sent off for further testing, which comes back that it's from a .38 Special revolver.
Typically, a .38 is a revolver-style type of weapon, the old Chief Special type of .38, but it usually a 6-shot. .38 caliber is mid-range as far as size, but it's also very popular handgun.
A lot of people like revolvers, and because you don't leave any shell casings, you don't leave a trail behind, and you take it with you. Whereas a semi-automatic, you gotta look for where your shell casings are, and usually you never find them, even though they're supposed to fall right by your feet.
Yet no .38 caliber weapon is found at Carol's house, and she denies having one. Police find themselves grasping at straws once more, until another truth is revealed.
As the investigation developed, it turned out that Carol Kopinkowski had a .38 revolver, and she had told friends that it would be the perfect gun to use in a crime because it wasn't registered.
It was a family member that had seen the gun at Lyle and Carol's house, and it was at that point where Carol had mentioned that it would be a good throwaway gun in a crime.
With this shocking turn of events, police speak to Carl Kopinkowski with only one question on their minds.
Of the people in his circle, of people that we know who would most likely be the person that would be guilty.
On a cool October night in Petoskey, Michigan, heavy machine operator Lyle Kopinkowski is murdered in cold blood. Over the course of the investigation, authorities questioned Lyle's wife, Carol, repeatedly, but her stories from the first night don't match to her current chain of events.
Her story didn't make sense. The events of that morning, why she would have let him go to work, when he was clearly intoxicated, according to her, why she didn't check on him during the day, why she didn't call him even after being informed by his work and from his brother that he had seen Lyle's truck on the side of the road at 9:30 in the evening, and earlier that day, she never called him. She never tried to make contact with him to find out if he was okay. All these things were very suspicious.
To further the case against Carol, a witness comes forward saying Carol owns a handgun that may match the bullets pulled from Lyle's body. The witness further states that Lyle was not a gun person, but Carol is.
So our first search warrant was for Carol and Lyle's primary residence on Townsend Road.
They were looking for a .38 revolver, murder weapon, and any other potential evidence that she might have been involved in the crime.
In that search, we located a couple of rifles. Didn't appear to be anything to do or have anything to do with the case. We found and located a handgun case, but no handgun in it. So we found that very interesting.
They did find, however, some books that were highly incriminating, would have been a part of the circumstantial nature of the case.
There was a book that I located, and in that book, there was highlighted pages of how to cover up evidence. There was another book that was used and also highlighted about toxicology and different plants and different substances that could poison or kill someone without a trace. That was pretty interesting. But of course, at that point, I didn't know, but I was starting to piece things together a little bit more.
Slowly, the community's opinion of Carol comes to light, and most of them aren't flattering.
From all accounts, Carol is manipulative, selfish, all about money. She wasn't honest or trustworthy. She was cheating on Lyle with John Ernst for years. Her phone records were pretty incriminating. Within a day or two of finding his body, she stopped talking to the police and took the Fifth Amendment. Now, while all citizens obviously have the right of silence and to not talk to the police, if you're not the murderer, why would you do that? In fact, you should be pounding down the door of the investigator, asking if there's any clues, if there's any suspects, what's going on with the case. She didn't do that. She didn't contact the investigators at all after she learned of her husband's murder, and in fact did the opposite. Completely shut down, took the Fifth, hired an attorney, and stopped answering questions. So all of this was highly incriminating.
Investigators also receive a call from Lyle's insurance company, asking if the police are able to exclude Carol as a suspect, as she's looking to collect Lyle's life insurance, worth $100,000.
Perhaps she thought there was money there, with insurance money. It was an easy way out.
Though the evidence seems to be piling up against Carol, everything is circumstantial. Investigators need to find something tangible, something concrete. But time is running out.
The case hasn't gone cold at that point, but it would be nice to have something else. You can make an arrest without the full puzzle, and at some point the prosecutor decided that we could go ahead and do that. So an arrest was made based on circumstantial evidence, and we were actually prepared to go to trial on a circumstantial murder case. We were worried about it, but we were certainly starting to prepare ourselves for it.
In early 2013, police take Carol Kopenkowski into custody. Police are confident that they have their murderer, but a twisted turn of events changes all that, and Carol is released from custody after paying $125,000 to post bail.
It was the most bizarre thing I've ever seen. I've handled over 30 homicide cases in my career, and not once have I ever encountered a situation where a murder suspect was out on bond. Here was Carol out on bond, unfortunately, due to the problems that had happened in the office with respect to personnel turnover before I arrived. The case kept getting adjourned, and the judge allowed her out on bond.
Carol's out on the street. There really was mixed emotion on whether Carol did it or not do it. I was catching the blunt of a lot of people angry that I or we, would arrest Carol. How could we think that she would do something like this? And the other side was she definitely did it. She's been plotting it for years.
Investigators are worried, but not deterred. They continue to dig for more concrete evidence. But as the days turn into months, the hunt seems to slip through their hands. The case is starting to turn cold. All hope seems lost until the unthinkable happens. A new witness comes forward with information that could send Carol away for good. Carol Kopinkoski is arrested for the murder of her husband, Lyle. But shortly after her arrest, and due to a flaw in the system, Carol makes bail. With the case against her built only on circumstantial evidence, authorities continue to desperately search for something more concrete to bring Carol in for good. If they fail, Lyle Kopinkoski's murderer could walk free. But everything changes when a witness by the name of Michael Woods comes forward with a startling claim.
I'm in my office, and I'm actually getting ready to go home for the night, and I receive a phone call from an attorney from Gaylord, Michigan, which is about an hour away. And that attorney told me that he had some information he thought I should know concerning the Kopinkoski murder. He told me that Carol had approached his client some years prior and had offered him $25,000 to kill Lyle.
Michael meets detectives to deliver a formal statement.
I met him at the door, and he immediately provided me with a piece of paper that basically had explained everything that had occurred.
She called me from her phone, and that was her quote. That's why I have it in quotes. She wanted to discuss a little matter. That's all she said over the phone.
I went to meet with her. There was no one else there that I can remember. I don't know why she thought she could trust me with this request, but not thinking she could really be serious about this. I thought it may be an opportunity to scam some money from her. So I told her I'd think about it, and I may know of someone that could help her.
Had nobody in mind at that time.
Okay. Nobody.
Nobody. No, I'm not in this business.
Sure. All right. But it was pretty specific to you that
she wanted her husband killed for $25,000.
So at that point, we're getting ready to go to trial on a circumstantial case, and this information pops up. It was truly epic.
Nobody knows of this.
Okay.
Does your girlfriend? Yeah, she knows. She's the person who always, she said, I told you should have done it right from the get-go.
Woods did regret not coming forward, but he was more worried about being involved, and he didn't want to be involved in this situation. It upset me, because if he would have brought this information up years ago, Lyle might still be alive.
In terms of the particulars, what was relevant to me was he had proof.
At some point during our two meetings, Carol handed me a white business-sized envelope.
On his phone, he had pictures from Carol of Lyle's truck with his license plate number on it, a map of his route to work every morning.
This is the break investigators have been waiting for.
At that point, bond was revoked, and she was immediately arrested and placed at the Emory County Jail.
Police confront Carol with this revelation. And finally, after months of uncertainty, Carol gives a shocking confession.
During that meeting, her attorney, myself, and Stu sat down in the interview room, and she basically laid out the whole plan, the whole incident, what had occurred prior to, during, and after Lyle's murder.
About, I think, 5 or so, he was ready. I says, okay, you can go get it. I went out and got the truck. I brought it out of the garage. Then, when he was ready to leave the house, I said, drop me off somewhere so that I can walk back, get my exercise. So we went up, I drove the truck. We went up to where it was parked. And then he got out and...
Who drove there?
I did.
Okay.
my child.
Okay. What did you use?
Think.
38? Was it unregistered?
Being in that room was certainly an emotional roller coaster, to be honest with you. You're happy because we got her. You're sad because this occurred. And you're upset because the family has gone through this for so long.
Having her walk us through that was chilling. She insisted on driving that morning, which is why the seat of the truck was pulled up. She drove them out to the spot on the side of the road where his truck was later found.
So he got on the passenger side and was walking to the driver's side. So they shot him. And then he started looking down the road. So I shot him again.
I asked her, so talk to me about the last shot. And what she had said is that Lyle had rolled into the ditch, got on his knees, and his exact words were, "Baby, we can work this out. Baby, we can work this out."
Nevertheless, she said, quote, "It's too late for that." Fired the final shot to his forehead and executed him as he lay there in the ditch.
During the meeting with Carol, she had said that she'd taken the gun from the scene and had hid it in a concrete block across the road from her house, where it remained there for a couple weeks until she was able to take it from that concrete block.
So then I took it and I cut it up
Cut it up. How did you do that?
with a hacksaw.
And it's then that Carol admits she did not act alone.
At one point, she had borrowed her friend's truck because she felt that we had placed a tracker on hers. And after borrowing that friend's truck, she picked up John Ernst from the airport. Instead of taking a right and heading south, they took a left and went up to the Mackinac Bridge. And as they were going over the Mackinac Bridge, they threw the gun over the bridge.
So John threw the gun off. I knew it was somewhere along the pieces of a gun, right? And he knew that that was the gun that was used in the murder.
Yes.
I assume that you discussed that specifically on the way up to the bridge, while you were going there with him, right?
Yeah, I said, you know, get rid of it.
Get rid of the gun.
Correct.
And he actually threw it out.
Yes.
A dive team is sent to the Mackinac Bridge, about an hour north of Petoskey, where Carol alleges John Ernst threw the gun. The team searches, but the pieces of the gun are never found.
On a professional level, like I say, it was one of the highlights of my career, being able to actually interview a murderer about the details of their crime. Plus, we now have enough information to charge John Ernst.
Carol Kopenkowski takes a plea deal in exchange for her full confession. She forgoes a trial and is sentenced.
We could have gone to trial and tried to get her convicted of first-degree murder, in which case she would have had no possibility of parole ever and died in prison. But it would have been a 2 to 3 week jury trial, an extensive outpouring of resources for probably not much more benefit.
With justice served, all but one question still lingers on the minds of all those involved in this horrific crime.
I also asked her why. And the most bizarre answer is that her family did not believe in divorce. So I asked, so you murdered him instead? And she said, yep.
She tried to claim that the reason for the murder was because he was abusive and he was an alcoholic and she was just tired of it. We don't believe Lyle was an alcoholic. We believe he drank, partly out of frustration because of her affair with John Ernst. We believe Lyle was very frustrated with Carol because Carol was not close with him, was very distant from him. He knew she was cheating on him, and rather than addressing that, she killed him.
extinguish a blazing house in the nick of time, exposing the murders the fire was meant to conceal. A woman's death in her bathtub looks like an accident, at least at first. Investigating a reported suicide, police in New Orleans find certain details suspiciously out of place. Killers can be masters at disguising their crimes, even when their victims are in plain sight. It takes a vigilant investigator to realize that first impressions are often dead wrong. In the small town of Livingston, Virginia, on August 29th, 1994, a passing motorist saw smoke rising from a house just before dawn. The firefighters battled the blaze for several hours before bringing it under control. The patterns of the burns and the speed at which the fire spread told them that this was arson. Had the motorist not called when he did, the house and all it contained would have been destroyed beyond recognition. The fire team was not in time to save the family who lived there. 4 people, including 2 small children, were dead. But once the smoke cleared and smoldering ruins were examined, it became apparent that this family did not die in the fire. Downstairs, Teresa Hodges had been strangled. Upstairs, 11-year-old Winter Hodges and 3-year-old Anna Hodges had been shot. In the master bedroom, the body of their father, Blaine Hodges, was found with a single gunshot to the head. A .22 caliber pistol without a barrel lay near his body. Special Agent Barry Gassee of the Virginia State Police had a theory about what happened.
It was pretty obvious that the evidence was just screaming. That's the words I use of murder-suicide. And as the morning wore on, it became even more evident that it was a murder-suicide.
Blaine Hodges had recently been convicted of embezzling from his employer, the United States Postal Service. Police believed that Blaine, despondent over his impending prison sentence, had killed his wife and his children. Then he doused their home with fuel oil, set it afire, and shot himself in the head. At autopsy, Dr. David Oxley, Deputy Chief Medical Examiner of Western Virginia, began to doubt the murder-suicide theory.
Well, when I examined the bodies, all 4 of the bodies, I noticed the thing that struck me was that the man, Blaine Hodges, had been dead considerably longer than the other 3. The body of Mr. Hodges was quite decomposed. The other bodies were not. What do we know so far? Well,
Oxley told Special Agent Gassee that Blaine Hodges couldn't have killed his family.
24 to 36 hours.
He died at least 12 hours earlier than they did. The gun collected at the scene also raised questions. The bullets retrieved from the victims were all .22 caliber, the same as the pistol retrieved next to Blaine Hodges. The pistol's serial number had been filed off, making it impossible to trace. Its missing barrel also hampered investigators.
A gun barrel leaves spiral marks called lands and grooves on every bullet that passes through. The bullets recovered from the victims had these markings, meaning they came from a gun with a barrel. Forensic Supervisor William Conrad of the Virginia Division of Forensic Science was convinced that someone besides Blaine Hodges must have pulled the trigger.
With the barrel removed and rifling being present on the father's bullet that was taken from his head, would indicate right away that he could not have fired that shot. There's no way he could have shot himself in the head and then removed the barrel. That wouldn't have happened.
Conrad wasn't convinced this was even the real murder weapon. The bullets taken from the bodies were marked with 6 lands and grooves. Reference manuals for the gun found at the crime scene showed its normal pattern would be 8 lands and grooves. Conrad concluded the gun found at the crime scene was merely a drop gun, intended to fool the police.
At a crime scene, if you're trying to frame someone, try to cover something up, you would drop a gun that's unrelated to the incident and try to trick us into thinking that was the actual weapon.
What looked like a murder-suicide at the crime scene had morphed into plain murder in the forensics lab. Aside from tipping detectives off, the gun was of little use at this stage in the investigation. They had no suspects, no ballistics to compare, and apparently not even the murder weapon. All that detectives could be sure of was that someone else had killed the family, then tried to make it appear like murder-suicide. The killer had hoped the flames would consume the evidence. Detectives sifting through the ashes at the crime scene now had a new assignment: to smoke out the killer. Police had no idea who killed the Hodges and their 2 daughters. They questioned friends, hoping to gather clues about their enemies. Their closest friend was a man named Earl Bramblett. He frequently stayed with the family. The kids called him Uncle Earl. Police asked Bramblett to come to the station and talk with them. He seemed genuinely upset about the deaths. But in the course of his interview, an offhanded comment caught investigators by surprise.
He spontaneously made a comment, and he said that sorry SOB, he had a beautiful family. He did them and did himself. Well, at that moment, I knew Mr. Brown was probably involved in the murders of the Hodges family. I knew that in order for somebody to know that outside of the police, that they would have had to have been in there when the murders occurred.
The media hadn't reported the murder-suicide story, and the police hadn't mentioned it to anyone outside of the force. Bramblett had revealed a detail only the killer would have known. Gussie kept his suspicions to himself. He needed more evidence before he could act on it. Bramblett agreed to come in for another interview later. When he failed to show, the police went to the motel where he was staying, since he had no fixed address. When he didn't answer the door, the detectives obtained a room key from the motel manager to make sure he was all right. Bramblett arrived just in time to stop them. Now belligerent, he dared them to place him under arrest. To the police, he was behaving like a man who was guilty. You think I've done something wrong? He believed the police would never be able to prove it. Bramblett's own words had made him a suspect, but words alone proved nothing. Three days after the Hodges family were killed, police set up a roadblock in front of the house. The fire had started around 4:30 a.m. By stopping cars around that time, they hoped to find someone who may have passed the house just before it burned. A woman told police she saw a vehicle pull out of the Hodges driveway at the time of the fire. She noticed the vehicle because it was so unusual. An old white pickup truck with a black tailgate. She did not notice the license number or the driver.
Earl, say we'll be back. Search warrant and look at your truck and your room. And read it.
While the roadblock was taking place, police returned to Bramblett's motel room with a search warrant. As Bramblett stood by, they searched for anything that might suggest his involvement in the deaths of Blaine Hodges and his family. Outside stood his white pickup truck with its distinctive black tailgate. In the front seat, police saw several .22 caliber shell casings. They were the same brand and caliber as the casings found at the murder scene. When the firing pin strikes a bullet, it leaves a distinct impression on the cartridge casing. William Conrad hoped to compare the casings from the crime scene with the ones found in Bramblett's truck. Once again, he found the killer was one step ahead of him. He'd obscured the marks on the cartridges.
It looked like someone had placed it in, fired the gun, took them out, placed them again, and fired them. Again, it indicated that someone was trying to manipulate the evidence after the fact to try to confuse the laboratory and what was going on.
Conrad would not be so easily thwarted. Among the hash of wayward marks, he looked for similarities between the cartridges retrieved from the truck and those from the murder scene.
We can put the marks together, see the reproducible patterns that are present, and be able to say that the marks that you see represented on both of them were made by the same firing pin impression.
After close scrutiny, he found what he was looking for. One of the cartridges from the crime scene had a strike mark identical to a cartridge from Bramblett's truck.
And I found enough of those individual characteristics that I was able to say that both of them had been fired by the same firing pin, to the exclusion of any other.
The cartridge casings were definitely used in the same gun, linking the drop gun to Bramblett. But that wasn't enough. Conrad still needed to find the gun that fired the fatal bullets. Meantime, detectives worked the case from another angle, trying to find out if Bramblett could have been the one who set the fire. The killer had torched the house around 4:30 a.m. on Monday, August 29th. To check Bramblett's whereabouts at that time, police went to the sign company where he worked. They learned he was scheduled to be at work at 5 a.m. the day of the fire.
The same employee that routinely checks the time cards checked Mr. Bramlett's. Mr. Bramlett's card had been obliterated. That the time that he punched in on Monday morning, August the 29th, had been blacked out where you couldn't read what time he might have punched in.
Police called on handwriting expert Gordon Menzies to find out what was under the marking.
Using infrared lighting techniques, I was able to separate the ink of the overwritten entry or the obliterating entry and come up with an entry of 5:08 M, which was apparently 8 minutes after 5 Monday.
The time card confirmed that Bramblett arrived at work after the blaze was set. But that didn't prove he was the one who set it. It only proved he had time to do it. The search for more evidence continued. Bramblett's employer told police that the morning after police searched Bramblett's motel room, Earl arrived at work seething with rage. 1 hour later, a co-worker noticed water running under a door. He found a pair of blue jeans thought to be Bramblett's. They smelled of the solvent used at the sign company. The manager thought them important enough to turn over to the police. Authorities hoped the jeans still held some clue to link Bramblett to the fire. scientists analyzed them and the water they were soaking in. To identify the chemicals in the fabric, the jeans were placed in a canister with a solvent called pentane. After they had soaked for 15 minutes, the pentane was poured off. The solvent evaporated under a fume hood, leaving behind a soup of the compounds from the jeans. The liquid was placed in a gas chromatograph. A readout identified each compound soaked out of the jeans. One was a commercial solvent used by the sign company. The other was fuel oil, like that used to douse the home of the murder victims. Investigators believe that Bramblett had tried to rinse the oil-soaked jeans clean, carelessly leaving them where anyone could find them. Though the jeans were potential evidence, they were, like everything else so far, circumstantial. Investigators pressed on. Hoping that Bramblett's carelessness didn't stop there, they looked for more evidence in the dumpster at the sign company. Along with documents belonging to Bramblett, they found a T-shirt bearing the words William Byrd High School, Class of 2001. One of the murder victims, 11-year-old Rebecca Hodges, owned such a T-shirt. It was missing from the crime scene, unaccounted for. The shirt found in the dumpster had apparently belonged to the victim. Investigators were encouraged. Only Bramblett would have had access to both the shirt and the dumpster. Still, it proved no wrongdoing. As the investigation into the deaths of the Hodges continued, Bramblett left town for good. Though Virginia police never let him out of their sight, they believed they had nothing to hold him. They didn't realize they had what they needed all along. Police were reasonably certain that Earl Bramblett killed the Hodges family, but that means nothing in a court of law. To prove it, they had to place him at the scene. The gun seemed to be the crucial element. They just didn't know how it fit. The killer had taken pains to make sure the weapon couldn't be identified. Without a serial number, it couldn't be traced. Without a barrel, investigators had no way to perform a ballistics test. They had no reason to believe that the gun from the crime scene was the murder weapon. According to William Conrad's reference manual, a bullet fired from this gun would show 8 lands and grooves. The bullets recovered from the Hodges showed only 6. The weapon sat on a shelf for a year while the case against Bramblett stalled. Then, on an unrelated investigation, Conrad ran across a weapon of the same brand as the gun in the Bramblett case. He test-fired the gun and was surprised to find that the bullets had 6 lands and grooves instead of 8. The reference manual had been wrong. Conrad now knew that the gun found in the Hodges house most likely was the murder weapon. The killer had removed its barrel because he thought it would make the gun untraceable. But through the cartridge casings and other forensic evidence, police found their man. By linking the gun to Earl Bramblett, the police had gathered the final piece of evidence they needed to prove he was the killer. Then, his sister in Indiana provided information about the possible motive. Bramblett, apparently feeling threatened, had sent her a huge number of audio tapes for safekeeping. He told her to send them to police if something happened to him. When she heard her brother was in trouble, she forwarded them to the Virginia authorities. In his audiotape diaries, Bramblett spoke of his more than casual attraction to the Hodges' 11-year-old daughter. Bramblett had once been a suspect in the disappearance of 2 small children, but his involvement had never been proved. According to the tapes, Bramblett began to believe that Blaine Hodges, faced with prison for embezzlement, had become a police informant. In his delusions, Bramblett had decided Blaine was using his daughter to entrap Bramblett as a child molester. The police believed that on Saturday, August 27, 1994, Bramblett had been visiting Blaine at his home. While Teresa Hodges and her children were out shopping, he took his .22 Magnum pistol and shot Blaine in the head. According to friends who saw them later that day, Bramblett told Teresa when she came home from shopping that Blaine, despondent over going to prison, needed some time by himself. Like the good uncle he pretended to be, he bundled Teresa and the children into his truck and took them camping in the nearby mountains. As Blaine Hodges lay dead in an upstairs bedroom, his wife and children went off with his killer. They would have only a 24-hour reprieve. The next day, Bramblett would resume his killing by strangling Teresa Hodges. Having killed both parents, Bramblett saved his last horrifying act of violence for the children. He then put the murder weapon next to Blaine Hodges' body to make it appear that Blaine had killed his family, then himself. He was sure the fuel he spread throughout the house would ignite an all-consuming fire, that the police would buy the theory of murder-suicide. But Bramblett had no sooner made his getaway than some officers spotted the flames and called the fire department. Special Agent Barry Cassee acknowledges that Bramblett almost got away with it.
His primary plan was, if the police buy this murder-suicide, I'm home free. And look, he would have been home free. But see, he did not know that the Benton Fire Department had responded in such a short order that they preserved the bodies upstairs.
It took the police almost 2 years to build their case. Bramblett had relocated to South Carolina, but the Virginia authorities had never lost his trail. He was arrested in July 1996, convicted of 4 counts of murder, and sentenced to death. Killers can disguise their crimes in many ways, but the truth often lies just below the surface. On April 29, 1997, police in the suburban Philadelphia community of Marion, Pennsylvania, arrived at the house of Craig Rabinowitz. He called 911 to report his wife unconscious in the bathtub. They found Rabinowitz clutching his wife Stephanie, still in the tub where he found her. He told police he'd discovered his wife on her side, her head underwater. He had no idea what caused his wife to drown. Paramedics tried to revive her, but she was dead. Detective Charlie Craig saw no signs of foul play in the death of Mrs. Rabinowitz.
My initial impression of the cause of death, after looking at Stephanie, after viewing her at the emergency ward, and after talking with the emergency ward doctor, was that it was an unexplained death or it was an accident.
All right, here we go.
What are you doing?
Friends and relatives mourned the untimely death of a woman in the prime of life. Craig and Stephanie had met when he was a camp counselor, and she was still a teenager. After they married, Stephanie went to law school and had a promising career as an attorney. To their friends, they seemed an ideal couple. Now, their happiness had come to a tragic end. Craig told police that on the night of his wife's death, he was watching a hockey game while she took a bath. He heard a thump coming from the bathroom, like the sound of a shampoo bottle hitting the floor. When his wife failed to emerge from the bath after 35 minutes, he went to check on her. That's when he found her submerged in the water, her face blue. He tried desperately to bring her back to life, then called 911. Detectives have an eye for inconsistencies. And though they had no reason to doubt that the death was an accident, one fact seemed bothersome. The paramedics mentioned that the victim was wearing jewelry, including a watch. Charlie Craig's partner, Detective Richard Peffel, asked some of his female friends if they bathed with their jewelry.
And almost exclusively, every woman said, absolutely not. The first one I did was the first night I got home about 4 a.m. and I woke up my wife from a dead sleep and asked, if you took a bath, would you wear all of your jewelry? She looked at me and said, no, why? And I said, don't worry about it, go back to sleep.
That eccentric detail motivated investigators to look for other inconsistencies. They checked the hospital records. Again, something didn't sit right. After death, a body's temperature normally drops at the rate of 1 degree per hour, even faster if it's sitting in water. When the victim arrived at the hospital, her temperature was only 1 degree below normal, indicating she died just 10 minutes before the call to 911. Her husband's estimate that 35 minutes passed after he heard a thump in the bathroom didn't add up. While detectives' suspicions were mounting, Chief Coroner Halbert Fillinger requested an autopsy to find out why the healthy 29-year-old died so suddenly. Craig Rabinowitz refused to allow it, asserting that Jewish law demands that the body be interred before sundown the day after death, and it must remain intact. But in cases of mysterious or sudden death, the coroner can overrule religious objections unless he's given a court order.
Because of their Jewish faith, Stephanie should have been buried before the next Sunday. And Dr. Fillinger was pressured by the family to release Stephanie's body so that she could be buried in accordance with her faith. And Dr. Fillinger was persistent that the body would not be released until a complete autopsy was committed.
When the body was brought in, it showed no marks, not even a bruise to indicate how the victim fell. According to Fillinger, that's not unusual.
There are injuries on the front of the body, and they occurred just prior to death, or a short time prior to death. And you examine the body right after death, you may not see anything at all.
But by the time the autopsy was conducted, 12 hours after she died, the victim's wounds began to reveal themselves, and the truth about her death. The medical examiners believed they were about to begin a routine autopsy on the victim of a mysterious death. Though the circumstances were tragic, examiners didn't expect them to be criminal. But they soon found themselves face to face with homicide. The first indication of foul play came with a look at the skin below the victim's eyes, where bruises made a silent accusation.
As the blood drains away from those sites of injury, leaving the surrounding skin quite pale, then the area of bruising stands up like a beacon in the night.
Bruises such as these come from lack of oxygen, most often when a victim chokes or is choked. Strangulation was a possibility worth looking into. The victim showed no external marks around her neck, but beneath the skin, the tissue damage confirmed Fillinger's suspicions.
And of course, when we first got the body up, we found the evidence of severe strangulation, a great deal of trauma in the neck.
The mystery of Stephanie Rabinowitz's sudden death had been solved, and a homicide investigation had begun. Detectives Charlie Craig and Richard Peffel, along with prosecutor Bruce Castor, had their prime suspect, the victim's husband, Craig Rabinowitz. They questioned him in the presence of his attorney.
When Charlie came back in and advised both Rabinowitz and the attorney that Stephanie had in fact died from manual strangulation, the attorney jumped up and said, "Oh my God, she strangled herself." But Charlie and I looked at the attorney and I said, I don't think so.
The Rabinowitz marriage seemed picture perfect. What could have driven Craig Rabinowitz to kill his wife? Police obtained a warrant to search the house for some sign of a motive. While his wife worked as a lawyer, Craig had supposedly run a business from his home. He convinced a number of his friends to invest in his promising venture. But a search of the house showed no evidence of a business being conducted there. Detectives had almost given up when one of the officers found a plastic bag in a crawl space above a closet. The bag was filled with receipts and financial records. They revealed that Craig Rabinowitz had been living a lie.
When we went through the bag, we found some pretty important items, including the list or ledger. We also found other receipts from pawn shops, indicating that some jewelry had recently been pawned. We also found receipts from furniture stores, furniture that he had bought, apparently another woman. So, during this whole case, he was pictured to be this loving, happy, devoted husband, and in this bag, we found otherwise.
A forensic accountant, skilled in deciphering complex financial transactions, reviewed the records. He found that what Craig had called a business was in fact a con game. He'd swindled his investors and convinced his trusting wife to remortgage their home. He then spent the money not on business, but to support his secret life. Credit card bills totaling $54,000 came from a single location, a strip club in Philadelphia. He'd been seeing one of the dancers there, showering her with gifts. At the time of his wife's death, Craig was hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. Desperate for money, Craig had taken out 2 insurance policies, each for $1.5 million. One was for his own life, the other for his wife. In a ledger found in the attic, Craig had calculated his net worth in the event his wife died, proving the crime was premeditated. After collecting on the insurance and paying off his debts, he had $1.2 million to spare. At the end of his rope, Craig turned on his unsuspecting wife and strangled her to death. He filled the bathtub, hoping to create the appearance of an accidental drowning. Then he called the police. It seemed like such a simple plan. According to Charlie Craig, far too simple.
A lot of people said to me, this guy must have seen this in a movie or read it in a book. Well, as it was coming close to trial, that kind of stuck in my mind. And I got the photos back out because I remember there was some book that had something to do with death.
A book on Rabinowitz's deaths had looked out of place when police searched his home. The author claimed that few deaths are followed by an autopsy.
Craig Rabinowitz was a con man. When he learned this information, that only 13% of the deaths are autopsied, Craig Rabinowitz was playing a con. He was playing the odds when he learned that information, that the odds were dramatically in his favor that Stephanie wouldn't be autopsied.
But an autopsy had been performed, exposing Craig Rabinowitz as a con man who'd gotten in too deeply. For murdering his wife, he was sentenced to life in prison without parole.